Oh, hello. Welcome to yet another episode of the Wick TV show, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political, cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today, gang, we are going to be talking about decriminalization.
I'm so sorry. I got fixed Nightbot. I don't know why it does that still.
I don't know what... Yeah, I'm doing my intro, buddy. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. And I'm sure I'll get you guys in. So, first of all, welcome to the show. I hope everyone had a great weekend. But yeah, we're going to be talking about decriminalization of anywhere from weed to heroin and cocaine. So, across the board, and what we think about that. I've got a great guest list, a lot of new people here. And I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, say hi, and give their opening statements. So, here we go. We're going to start with the person who brought this topic to me. Hi, Cord. Go ahead. What are your thoughts here?
Hey, Wick. How are you? Thank you for having me on. I'm excited for this to be my first panel. So I guess for me, I've always had a very strong belief that no one should have to go to jail due to the drugs that they use. I feel like it produces a lot of negative effects, and it's not the right solution to how we can solve the issue of drug use. I think it would be better if we use proper treatment and to help with people who are addicted. As we've seen that people who do go to jail for even mild drug use like marijuana, when they come back out, they still have those same addictions, those same cravings. Even with harder drugs, things like opioids or cocaine, they still have those same addictions and cravings. Studies have proven that. So I've always felt that treatment is the right way to go about it, and proper rehabilitation is the right way to go about it. And that's why I supported decriminalization of drugs, not necessarily the legalization. I don't know if I agree that we should necessarily have all drugs be legal, but certainly I don't believe anyone should have to go to prison just for their recreational use of drugs. So yes, that's my position on it. Thank you for having me on again.
Well, thanks for being here, and I'm looking forward to see your arguments. Next up, we have Noel. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, so in my opinion, I think all drugs should be criminalized. So the main reason is because when you look at the country with the least crime, for example, China, South Korea, Japan, Turkey, Hungary, Egypt, Singapore, and Colombia. Well, maybe not Colombia, but they have like a zero tolerance for drugs, and then therefore like there's like a lot less like crime, and I think that like drug use kind of correlates with crimes through.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Is this me? Is this my end, or is this his end?
I think that's him.
It's him. I can hear you. Fine.
Oh, man. Well,
I'm sorry.
Big drug trying to take him out.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Colombia, all these countries, you listed a bunch of countries that don't have tolerance, any tolerance for drugs, and you said that they have low crime. Continue and then wrap it up.
So I understand all those countries have the death penalty for drugs, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I do notice that the people living in those countries have a much higher living way of living than people in America or Canada, where they have much more lenient drug policy. I just noticed that when there's more lenient drug policy, there's also a much higher increase in crime. So yeah, that's my opening. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for being here, and yeah, hopefully you stay with us and the internet doesn't get you. Okay, Next up, Lactoid. Hit us.
Yeah, my opinion is pretty straightforward. The government has no right to dictate what we can or cannot put into our own bodies. It's absolutely fucking crazy. The idea that government's gonna come after people with police and throw them in a cage if they happen to have the wrong substance or put the wrong substance in their body. I don't think China is a good barometer of what's a good country to be in. I think America needs to live up to its ideal of freedom and legalize all drugs today. I think legalizing all drugs is not only going to be the right thing to do from a individual freedom perspective, but I also think it's going to have positive impacts, such as reducing the power of gangs, reducing the power of the cartel, reducing overdoses, reducing HIV transmission rates, and creating a new industry in which we can actually have legal economic production as opposed to what we currently have, which is feeding cartels a fuck ton of money, which they're using to kill innocent civilians. So it's a bad idea.
Well, thank you for being here, and we will see how the discussion plays out. Next up, food shops, please.
Yeah, sure. I'm Fuchas. Generally, I believe in the decriminalization of drugs. There just seems to be some good programs, like, for example, in Sweden and in Norway, that seems to point towards rehabilitation. Just seems to be the best way to go. For example, using tax dollars in order to fund programs to help people in drug recovery programs. And in Portugal, I know a lot of people point towards Portugal. Sometimes when it comes to, especially a TYT, when it comes to, oh, there's a example that's gone wrong or whatever, but we can point towards like lack of funding when it comes to, oh yeah, this is why it's gone wrong, instead of, oh, this is like it's because of drugs and that's why it's gone wrong. So yeah, that's my stance for now, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to the discussion. And next up, we have one more guest, but they're going to be late. But let's get FK in here. FK, what is your stance?
Hey, listen, I think it was pretty based when a bunch of women who were getting beat by their wives came together or beat by their husbands came together and said, maybe it's not good to have people drinking every night right after work. Maybe it's not good to have people coming home after work and shooting up heroin or doing coke. Maybe we do need to do some prohibition. Maybe we do need to have some standard of rules and expectations in place. We might not have to go back to the extreme, but maybe it's time for us to say, hey, drugs aren't just something we got to accept. We still should probably punish you for excessive, excessive use of it, right? And we could try to give you the help if you want to get that. But a lot of people who are addicts don't even take the help when it's offered to them.
Okay,
All
and with
enough.
that, the floor is open. Portland will be joining us when he gets here, but you snooze, you lose on the opening statements. So, open discussion. Go ahead, gang.
Yeah, I guess Noel, I would love to hear you clarify your position a little bit more clearly. Same with FK. I think you're also on the anti-decriminalization aspect of it.
Yes.
So
Alcohol and drugs.
of also alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah. No, well, I don't think decriminalization is I think that's the right answer because I think what my position, how I view it is addiction is the main issue. And there's been no evidence to suggest that if you decriminalize drug use, there will be a rise in people who are using it problematically. There will always be a rise of drug use overall, but in terms of people who will be addicted and using it harmfully, there's nothing to suggest that.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you believe if something affects other people, the state should have a like some say in it? Like if you're doing like a drug and then that's gonna affect you showing up to work or driving on the road, should the state have some say in that or no?
Well, yeah, I think anything that harms anybody else, you should have the viewpoint, but I don't think that's necessarily the drugs. If you drink and drive, you're going to be charged for irresponsibly drinking and driving. It's not because you drank the alcohol. You could have drank the alcohol and stayed at home, but you're being charged for killing someone because you drank and drive. Because you you drank alcohol and then you drove. If you do drugs and we decriminalize drugs, I don't think we should be sending someone to jail for doing meth. But we should be sending them to jail if they drove a car and they killed a family.
Okay, so why do you think the countries that have zero tolerance for drug use also have like very low crime rate? Like, why do you think that is?
Provide me an example of that. Which country are you speaking to?
China, South Korea, Japan.
Even countries that have a lot of drugs, like Portugal, have a lower crime rate than America.
Yeah, of course.
It's not exactly correlated, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
America's
don't
also
know.
punishing drug users,
You
right?
can
Whereas
just like
Portugal's
all
letting
drugs,
this
there's
heroin
probably a
user
lot of
walk
other
around the
factors that
street
contribute to
shooting
that.
up.
Sorry,
I'm curious. I know FK's position on this, but Noel, what's your position on alcohol? Right? I mean, this is like the ultimate example that people like pro drug legalization advocates use as like, well, hey, here's a drug that people are using to an extent far greater than marijuana. What about that?
Yeah, so I have a family member that kind of ruined their life over alcohol, so I'm totally against it because it really ruins your life. And it just
Abolition. Okay.
Yeah, I'm totally against it. Because honestly, I think everyone in America should have like free counseling. Because I think people that do drugs and alcohol, it's a way to numb the pain of like personal experience. So I think everyone
True,
should be able to have like free healthcare and free mental health help, because it's a cope, I think.
Are you in favor of
when-
allowing people to use any kind of recreational substance like tobacco? I don't know, something else.
I mean, I think
Sugar.
of course sugar. I mean,
No.
maybe the only thing is like weed, maybe, I guess, but like obviously weed shouldn't be penalized, but like yeah.
Wait, why not?
Lactoid brings up a good point because sugar is more addictive and kills more people every year than cocaine does.
Way more
Get rid
people.
of
When
it.
we look
Hold
at
on.
obesity in
We
America,
should stop.
This
we
is
should
a little,
punish these companies. They're literally drug dealers.
So this is a little
Kellogg's
unbalanced. So
hates
I'm
it.
going to step in here because I have some questions for Lactoid and Kycord and food shops here. Okay,
Please.
if you'll indulge me,
Whoa.
you will. So
hit me.
we recognize, right, that sugar and alcohol, while they both might do harm, one has the potential for much more harm if abused. Like if you abuse sugar, you're going to hurt yourself, but there's very little chance that you will hurt someone else. However, with
Exactly.
alcohol, for example, abuse of alcohol, the potential for someone abusing that to do harm to another person, would you all agree is much higher than with sugar?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, because people use sugar to fuck over their children's lives on an infinite.
That's
day
actually
after
unironically
day.
that's sort of like the position I was thinking of. The idea
No,
of
but I
like
would
you have
think-
children who are feeding garbage and they're dying of heart disease, right? I mean, this is hurting them.
Like, there's been people who have died at younger and younger
At that
ages
point,
due
that's
to those
like
companies.
one step removed, right? Because you can argue that there is a sort of direct harm that comes from alcohol, where like if you get drunk enough and you beat up somebody, like that is like fist, right? But then
Yeah.
if you do something like sugar, then maybe 10 years down the line you develop diabetes. But I wouldn't equate these two things as like exactly the same.
Well,
right?
hold on,
This
hold
is
on.
more
It's,
like
it's more
this is more
delayed.
like our parents being negligent by not actively taking a step into looking at their kids' nutritions and just letting their kids have like worse and worse diets, where they're like, in a way, they're giving them these addictions to these sugars, right? They're giving them these addictions to these unhealthy foods that are just
Yeah,
ruining their lives
lactoid.
later on.
Lactoid, if you found out someone's parents was feeding them sugary cereal, and you found out another set of parents was giving their kids whiskey, which would you judge as to be worse parents? The parents who were letting their 6-year-old just chug some gin every night, or the parents who let them have some Cocoa Puffs?
Yeah,
or
What if they
something?
gave them a
So-
teaspoon
so
of whiskey
I
or a
wanna-
cup of sugar?
So I want to agree with that in the sense of, yeah, I would judge the parents who are feeding their kid whiskey a lot more. That being said, though, I guess, especially when we're crafting policy, we have to consider the scope and gravity of the issue, right? And so what do I think is a bigger problem in America today? Children eating McDonald's or children drinking whiskey? I think it's very clear that McDonald's is a much bigger issue for
Sure, because
children's
McDonald's
health
is
overall.
illegal, and alcohol for children is not.
Yeah.
So
And I
through
wanna-
that
I
argument,
Yes.
we can
Yep.
see that making something illegal or criminalizing something actually makes it less of a problem than if we make it legal.
Yes, I'm okay. I'm actually, so my position's a little nuanced here. I'm okay with criminalizing all, like, giving kids any kind of drugs or sugar or fast food or any of this shit. I think that like is a stronger argument than when
That
it
seems
comes
like kind of
to
extreme
when it comes. So I know you can consider it to be extreme, but like when we're looking at adults, when we're looking at people 18 or older, the idea of are you going to go to the obese person and like forcibly take away their McDonald's? No, and I'm also not going to go to the person who's drinking alcohol and forcibly take away their alcohol, because if they're an adult, right, and they're choosing to like make a decision for themselves, and they're not like showing any history of actively harming other people, then I don't see what right we have to interfere with their decision. Now, if they have a history of harming people, I think it's perfectly fine to, like, as part of punishment for their crime, to say, hey, look, you obviously can't fucking handle this, so as part of the punishment, you can't buy alcohol anymore, or you can't buy this substance anymore. We're going to like prevent you from going into bars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We already have that as part of punishment for crime, and we should.
So
have
you
that.
view it as a privilege. You view like all these things you don't have like a right to drink alcohol. You have a
Well,
privilege to
punishment
drink
removes
alcohol.
your rights, right? You have a right to movement, but when we put you in a cage when you commit a crime, we are taking away your right to movement. So then the question is removing that right justified? I think it is justified if you beat somebody up. I don't think it's justified if you have a glass of wine every fucking week with your Italian spaghetti, right? Like, who
So
cares?
that's-
What business is it of mine that you're drinking?
Well,
glass
that's what
of
I would
wine?
say that the thing is, and I agree with like a lot of things that you said, except for maybe the point of maybe criminalizing fast food and sugar for children. But I think back to what we're talking about with the drugs, I think the main issue is the addiction aspect of alcohol, because
Yeah, we're sort of
alcohol
veering off.
moderation alcohol moderation isn't inherently awful. Having a glass of wine with your lasagna at nighttime isn't gonna make anything too crazy for you. But if you're drinking alcohol every single day and it's a continuous use, and going back to the drug argument, if you're doing heroin every single day and it comes back to a stage where you're now affecting other people in your personal life and you're affecting everyone around you, then you need to seek treatment. And when it comes to decriminalizing drug use,
When do you
Uh,
think when do you think we should compel treatment? That's like the question, right? If someone like
I think-
attacks somebody else, sure, but if somebody just doesn't show up for their job, it's not my business if they have a job or not, right?
Well, I think the most common sense answer for that would probably be when someone recognizes, like similar how we would report someone who's already doing drug use. If they're doing it publicly and a police officer sees it, hey, we're not going to arrest you, but we're
Yeah,
going to.
if you have like a
you
crack
do it-
pipe like in the corner on the street, like you're sitting there on the curb and you're like lighting up a crack pipe, that's probably like a pretty big sign. Yeah.
Because you could do heroin in the privacy of your own home and no one ever finds out, and then no one ever treats it. But that would be the same thing for if
So-
like no one would
Wait,
find out
just
if
real
you're-
quick, Kycord, what do you think the odds are if someone is doing heroin in their own house in the privacy of their own home? Odds are people are going to figure that out because heroin
Yeah.
is not the same as alcohol. Let's separate these things. Like
Okay.
when we talk about these drugs, we tend to conflate them all as the same, right? Like we always talk in groups. Like we could say
They are
this
the
with
same.
alcohol and in heroin, right? But there's a substantive difference between someone who does a little who has some heroin with their lasagna and someone who has a glass of wine with their lasagna. There's going to be different impacts on their lives. We understand
I
this,
know,
correct?
That's what I'm saying. The minute that someone finds out, you'd put them into treatment. Like if it's a continuous pattern of heroin use, if it's a continuous pattern of alcohol use, the same thing that you would do for them, you put them in AA. You would put a continuous heroin addict into treatment. You wouldn't necessarily arrest them. You wouldn't necessarily arrest them and put them in jail for doing heroin in the comfort of their own house. That's what I'm. Do you
Wait.
understand
So
what I'm saying?
if you have somebody, let's say, who's drinking every day, but like
Yeah.
they aren't let's say they aren't driving and they're not attacking people, they're not beating people
Mhm.
up, they're just being they're just being like a pretty peaceful drunk, and they have a history of being a peaceful drunk. Are you concerned at all, I guess, with the point that I've been bringing up of like the state coming in and dictating to you how you should live your life? Why is it
Absolutely
their
not.
business
No,
whether I drink?
If they want to be reckless with their
What
own
do you mean the
personal
state
alcohol
dictates
use,
how you live your life all the time? Like, I don't think that's an argument, right?
They shouldn't. I want to minimize that as much as possible.
yeah,
Why?
I agree with you on that point, because I don't think if you're drinking alcohol and you're being reckless with your own alcohol usage and you're not harming anyone, you're not creating a harm for someone else. You're not creating a
Okay.
If
Okay.
you're only just
Kycord,
having one
stop, just real quick, because I want to.
Whoa.
Oh, hopefully his internet. comes
Ah,
back.
now we
See,
have
now-
nothing
now the
but
battle's
base drug
equal.
defenders.
Hopefully.
Now we're equal.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll take
Let's
you on
circle
if I
jerk.
have to.
Let's
do
Okay,
it.
this has been a
Now
scuff
we're
panel, but
equal.
we're gonna get it.
Now we're
Come
equal.
on,
Okay.
heroin.
Anyway, so let me ask all of you.
I'm pretty sure
So
Lactose
we
is
keep
against
talking.
us.
We call it.
I don't think Lactose is with us. Sorry.
Lactoid's in his own universe. Okay, so let me ask, right? Because Kycord specifically, you keep saying that. Well, if they're not hurting anyone, even if they're hurting themselves, it's okay, right? Because we recognize that if they're not hurting anyone, if they haven't done anything wrong, they probably shouldn't be punished. But I don't think you believe this, and this is what I'm going to ask you a couple questions to kind of get at your belief here. If a company, a construction company, is going through. They've been building houses, but they haven't been following code, right? It hasn't been up to code. They've been doing faulty wiring. They just slapdash everything together, cutting corners for costs. All their shit is just really, really bad. But nothing's falling down, right? Nothing's breaking. There's been no fires. No one's got hurt yet.
Mm-hmm.
Should they be charged?
Yeah.
Why?
Eventually to the point. When I mean, if
No
you're
one's
not
getting hurt.
following-
It's surprise.
Yeah, if
It's their own
if they're
thing. No one's been
if they're not
hurt.
following proper safety. and someone can get hurt. The ability and the risk of someone getting hurt is there.
Okay,
When you're-
so when you have someone, when you decriminalize drug use for heroin, cocaine, and all these other hard drugs, right?
Mhm.
Do you not think that there is also that lack of safety, that risk that goes astronomically up? So why would you be okay with charging the construction company that hasn't been following the standards, who's just been playing loosey-goosey, while saying those people who want to just go drink it up, snort lines of coke, do all this heroin, why are they let off?
Because under your hypothetical, the construction company, there's going to be people around who will see that they're not following the code. I'm assuming will people know that they're not following the
So
code?
they figured it out.
Yeah. So eventually, when they figure it out for this person who's snorting cocaine in his basement every single night, we will send them to treatment, and hopefully they can be rehabilitated.
Okay, so
At
you are
that
for
point-
criminalizing if we find out, but if you can keep it
No,
secret,
not
you're okay with
criminalizing.
it?
We're not throwing them in jail. We are sending them to treatment.
Wait, so are you
We're giving them
okay, or are
the
you
same-
not
it's
okay
kind of
with
the
people
same
just
thing.
doing drugs? Are you like okay with drugs, or are you just not
Yeah,
okay
I'm
with
okay
drugs
with
at all?
people just casually doing drugs as long as they're not making a harm for anyone else.
Wick, I want
But
to
I
answer
think,
your
like,
question.
If you're
The
doing
code.
like here's what I would say, right? If you have like a mother and she's doing meth, right?
Mhm.
Unless she can prove that she was doing meth in some like medical environment where her kids weren't around and they were being properly babysat, I don't know if we're like gonna live in a society where we're like, hey, it's completely okay. Like you can allow to be that negligent. You can be allowed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Under that hypothetical, though, once those children, give me age for those kids.
They're kids. They're like maybe like 12, maybe like 10. They're,
Okay,
like,
when they go to school, if
yeah.
they blab to their friends that their mom is doing meth, there's going to be an investigation. That mom is going to get sent to rehab.
Wait, but are you not okay with her doing meth? Like,
No,
what
I'm
if she's
fine
not
with her doing
harming her
meth, but
kids?
if
What if
she's
it's just
harming-
creating an environment where she might harm her kids?
Oh, then
Because, you know,
yeah,
it's
I'm
meth,
fine with her.
but,
doing
like, what if
meth.
she's not,
going to
like-
harm her kids under meth? If
Okay,
she's under
we
the
don't
influ-
know. This is a problem with policy. So we don't know what will happen in the future. We don't have crystal balls. We aren't oracles. We aren't seers. But we make laws based on potential harm all the time. All the time. And this is good, actually. We see that if certain people engage in certain behaviors, the risk to hurting others or themselves goes up a lot, and we can put penalties on that, whether it be civil or criminal or a mixture of both, depending on the severity. And so again, I ask you, right, if you have a mom
Okay.
doing any kind of hard drugs in their house, sure, they might be the 1 in a million who aren't going to actually
She
impact
might be
or
the
harm
good
the
meth
kids.
mom.
Yes, but we recognize that most likely it's going to impact the kids, and most likely that impact is going to be negative. Do you disagree?
no. Yeah, because she should get treatment. We're not legalizing drugs. Drugs aren't not good. Drugs are not a good thing that we should support. We are just saying that they shouldn't be thrown in jail for doing drugs.
Why not?
Because
That's how you help the
we
kid.
if we can rehabilitate them and get them to a point where they're not doing drugs, and
Why don't we use jail as a
Okay,
rehabilitation
hold on.
center? Why don't we fund
Alright,
jails
not
and
gonna
make
help
them
the kid.
a
Stop.
place to rehabilitate people?
Okay. It seems like in countries like Norway and Sweden, they treat the addiction to drugs as less of like a criminal matter and more of like a mental health issue. For example, if you are addicted to drugs, then you have some kind of mental illness going on that is causing you to use drugs as a form of coping. So what they have is that since their taxes are so high, what they do is that they have programs where a select number of people, like a few thousand people every single year, are selected to be invited into this rehabilitation center to like this part of the country or different parts of the country where you are to go on like this rehabilitation program, and everything is paid, all the way from bedding, housing to like the entire program, the entire thing. And I'm pretty sure that the entire course of this rehabilitation program is actually cheaper than a sentencing and imprisonment of this person in their prison system. Yeah, what's up?
Like, that's nice. We could. I'd be fine with having a program like that. But at the end of the day, this is like some okay. Like, if you want to come, we'll like have you join. what's wrong with just being like, listen, we're gonna like upgrade our prisons, we're gonna invest into our prisons, also having the capability to rehabilitate people with drug addictions, and being like, listen, if we keep catching you on multiple occasions buying drugs, using drugs, creating like unsafe situations for other people with drugs, we'll put you in prison and we'll have you go through that rehabilitation process in some confined space. Whether you have a choice or not, I don't know.
Here's the
that's
thing.
okay.
Here's the thing.
Like,
Here's the thing. Just because like the word prison gets thrown around and like and prison is always associated with like bad and dank and rats and shit like that, right? Doesn't mean that I view prison as like permanently like that way, right?
Yeah.
If we can turn prison into some kind of like rehabilitation kind of shit, right? If there could be like drug rehabilitation in prisons, I'm not gonna be the one to complain about it, right?
Let's. I understand the
Can I say
hypotheticals.
2 things real quick?
You can,
Fir-
but then I want to ground this conversation and just real
Okay.
quick. Like I would like us to deal with like today, now, as the prison system exists now, right? That's what I want to center the discussion around.
Sure. So the first,
Yeah,
well,
sure.
I just
I
let
wanna
me,
talk
let me
about
correct one
Portugal,
thing.
but
I want
sure,
to
yeah.
I want to correct one thing. Sweden has actually very strong drug laws, and in fact, they're a lot stronger than the U.S. in a lot of ways. So people often lump in like Sweden and like because it's a Nordic country and these countries that have pretty lax laws. This is simply not true when it comes to Sweden. Just want to make that clear, right? They are a country that treats drugs very strictly, and yet they still have relatively better outcomes in some regards compared to America. So I mean that's just a fact, and I'm going to deal with the facts.
Didn't Sweden
Um,
decriminalize like
No,
drug usage? Or
no,
it
no.
didn't? Okay.
Portugal did. Yeah, Sweden did not.
Portugal did,
They
yeah.
criminalize use,
To answer
possession,
the
purchase, sale, and
coding
transfer.
to answer the code
Mhm.
question as to whether or not you should be able to move into a building that wasn't built to code, I think it's perfectly reasonable that if you want, like, let's say you're a single guy and you want like a cheap living space
No, I'm
where
talking
you're
about
going to live.
building it, not living.
No,
in it.
I know,
Mhm.
I know. But if you want, like, let's say this housing built and like the person selling it, who builds it and sells it to you, is like, hey, just so you know, we didn't follow XYZ code. Like, just so you know, as an adult, do you feel comfortable like living in this? And you say yes. I think that's perfectly fine, right? I agree with you that risks are something that needs to be acknowledged. But if people consent to risks over their own body, whether it be skydiving, bungee jumping, diving, or doing drugs and alcohol, or vaping, as we just saw on camera, right? If you want to consent,
that wasn't vape, that was water vapor.
Sure.
I would never.
If you want to consent to that kind of risk yourself, there is nothing wrong with that, right? The problem is the problem that you're conflating here, Wick, is when you're saying like, well, you know, we're going to dictate your personal risk tolerance using building codes as an example. I don't think the government should be involved in that, especially because I should have I'm assuming you agree that I should have the right to like more or less live my own life and take my own risks as I see fit.
But you do understand the difference between the buyer and the seller in this case. One is a provider of things, right? So when we talk about the construction company, they are providing these things, and they're incentivized to do so because we allow, in your hypothetical here, we would allow people to purchase their product. And thus, a market will be created, and markets will do what they will do. And I think that this will create adverse effects on people, and I think the risk is just too high to allow to happen. Because unlike you, I am for some sensible regulations when it comes to things. I don't believe freedom at all costs. I think freedom should have limits, and these are one of those.
Sure,
I think the same thing with drugs, right? That we can recognize, just if I may, that we can recognize that drug criminalization has had some desultory effects. It's done some harm. But when we talk about decriminalizing things like heroin and cocaine and these other super hard drugs, no, there's a line here. I can get on board with you for like weed or something, right? But when we're talking about like the stuff that like you can't just do a little heroin, gang. Have you never known someone who's done heroin? They don't just do a little. I can't think of
most people who try heroin do not get addicted.
And
Lactode would know. He's Canadian. They're forced to try.
You can look that up. You can look that up.
We try to help and rehabilitate them so they're not addicted to heroin anymore, if it does happen.
Something I'm curious about, because Lactode has like a different view, but it seems like Food and Key kind of have like co-aligning views. How do you convince a population to actually fund these programs? Because you talked about how like the reason a lot of these programs are kind of failing is because of this lack of funding. And I'm going to be honest, I've been to city meetings, I've been to town meetings. And I've seen what these people care about. It's going to be really hard to convince the people who are most active in these communities to like care about funding these programs that heavily.
Well,
It's going to be cheaper than prison. That's for damn sure.
yeah, no, I would say I would divulge some of the funds from prison because we spend so much as a society on a prison system. And if we didn't send as many people for really stupid drug charges to prison, I'm sure we can even just put a portion of that to rehabilitating them and
Wouldn't-
helping them get rid of their addiction to whatever drug.
Hold on,
Again,
I want to
wouldn't
talk
it
about
be cheap?
Portugal. Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in Portugal, I don't know what you guys, is that the correct way to pronounce it?
Portugal?
Portugal?
Are you saying Portugal?
Is it
Portugal.
Portugal?
Yeah, the T is like a
Portugal.
CH.
It's
Portugal.
Portugal.
Portugal. Okay, well, listen, the pronunciation is retarded. Okay, so I'm just.
Oh,
gonna go
you
ahead, right?
racist!
So, well, it's remedial. Okay, there you go. All right. So anyway, right? It just seems like overall, the decriminalization worked up until they slashed the funding for, I think, one of the government agencies for, was it like the, let me see what I wrote here, the oversight operation. Yeah, in 2012. Yeah. And it seems like they had a mixture. The reason that it worked is that they had a mixture of both criminalization and decriminalization at the same time. For example, they lessened a lot of the criminalization that goes on behind the drugs, but they didn't decriminalize it all the way. For example, if they saw you smoking some or injecting some crazy shit on the streets, right? They can't really confirm what you're doing in your mom's basement. They can't really confirm what the hell you're doing in your own house, obviously, right? Because we talked about that before, right? But if you're on the streets, that's something the cops can actually confirm. So they see that and they're like, okay, we're gonna give you an invitation, a red envelope to go to a rehab center. Go, but you don't have to go. You don't have to go. But if you do go, then you can get a fine dismissed after several times. So you might, after several, it seems like after several times, you might get a fine, and you might get a fine dismissed if you do go, right? However, you are forbidden from smoking. You're forbidden from going back to the same area multiple times. And if you do drugs recreationally, you will get fined or something like that. And but then typically you will never get locked up for doing any drugs. You'll get fined. It seems like just the fine incentive alone will discourage people from doing these things. You don't need to lock people up in order to like discourage.
But isn't a fine also kind of fucked? Because I feel like I've heard from so long ago about how fines, especially with these people in like less developed areas,
This is just a poor
that
people
don't
tax.
have that much funding.
That's what a fine is.
No. But they only start charging fines once they get to a level where it is like a very repeat offender. Okay. And the thing is, in the middle, they have already offered a lot of like free invitations to go get treated. So at that point, they know for sure that it is your own free will that you're deciding not to get treated, and it is your negligence that you're not getting treated, and it's not because that you're poor or whatever like that. Does that make sense?
Go ahead, Catcord.
But then in that
support Food Shop's point, I want to say we did see in Portugal a decrease in overdose deaths and less transmissions from clinical diseases that went down as well.
HIV.
So I know HIV. So like what Lectelli said earlier.
Wait, hold on. Didn't HIV rates go up? And I'm pretty sure that's the only.
No,
not in Portugal. It went down.
Not in Portugal?
HIV rates in Portugal following decriminalization went down a lot.
Okay, well, that supports my argument.
And there was also reports of like less social disruption. So I think in Portugal, the decriminalization of drugs was a huge success over there. So yeah, just to support Food Shop's point a little bit and Lactoid's point earlier about HIV transmissions.
I think it can be. Like, that could be fine and all, but, like, it still seems to be the case that Portugal right now is running into the issue of, like, how do they continue
The reason it's running into the issue
You gotta let FK finish, so.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go.
I was just gonna be running into that issue. And then, like, bro, I've had liberal people sending me stuff about Portland and how Portland is becoming, like, kind of fucked because of some of the, like, needle sharing programs and things. It's not that I even think those programs are bad, but they just don't like how some of those programs aren't handled well, and it's making like parts of the city dirtier, and it's making it more like noticeable to them.
Yeah,
But yeah,
FK.
go ahead.
If when it comes to like legalization of drugs, like in places like Portland or like a more extreme example would be like Colorado for like things like weed. Going back to like a softer example of it, you know, we did see an increase in adults using recreational drug use, but it wasn't problematic. It wasn't There wasn't many people getting addicted. There was it stayed. Sorry, reports of addiction stayed at the same level in places like Colorado. So I feel like it's still not enough evidence for me to move on to say that decriminalization would be a bad thing, or that even legalization would be an awful thing.
Did they decriminalize hard drugs in Colorado? I know they
No,
did weed.
it was just weed.
Okay.
It was just
Well,
We-
and
again,
also
we can't
What does
psilocybin.
decriminalization even like
Sure.
fully look like to you?
Good question.
Hold on.
What do you
hold
mean
on.
by?
I can't.
Sorry, food shops.
Oh no,
Legalize
you're
it
good, you're
all.
good.
No, don't apologize to her. He asked you a question, and I'm curious too. When you say decriminalization, what do you mean?
Oh, I'm just saying.
Vending
people-
machines.
Yeah, no, people not going to jail for doing drug use, and first of all, in Colorado it was legalized, but
But are
in-
you allowed to like sell it and all that, or is it just like?
oh no, no.
you
Well,
don't
you
get punished
have
for
to
using it?
you have to get like a license to sell it in Colorado, I believe. You have to get like something.
There's a lot of states that have legalized marijuana. Like a
Well,
lot.
not just marijuana. Are you guys okay with that for everything? Is what I'm asking. Like, if it, like, should people
Yes.
be allowed to get licenses
I
to
mean,
sell meth?
If you open a legit store and it's checked out, and we know that there's nothing like crazy in your drugs, then I'm fine with it.
Meth. That's the crazy part of the drug.
I yeah, no, but like, okay, for example, like something like
Yeah,
opioids,
hope they
like,
don't
there's no
slip
fentanyl.
some meth into my meth, right? Like,
Yeah, but I
Uh,
guess
uh,
like overall, I'm fine with
Wait.
if it's checked out and it's like I would be fine with any safe.
so you'd be
seller
okay
that's
with a
not.
store, a corner store, like on the street, like on Main Street, downtown USA, downtown your favorite city, just having a heroin superstore with heroin, crack, meth, with all
No,
the
I would
supplies
want it
you
to
could
be an
need.
official dispensary, where because,
No,
like,
yeah,
if-
they're
let's say-
officially licensed. They're advertising it on TV now.
Yeah, I know,
right?
but like, Wick, I wouldn't want it.
Oh,
to
that
be,
is a
like,
good question.
7-Eleven,
Should you be
where, like, a
allowed to
kid-
advertise meth?
Oh, well, it,
No,
it
no,
should
I
be.
wanna
It,
address
it,
the
it can.
point.
It can
I
be
wanna
in a
address the point.
7-Eleven.
Yeah,
as
I
long
know,
as it's
that's
licensed.
I don't know about that because like if a child walks into 7-Eleven, what like I guess it would be over the counter, but if,
Yeah, like cigarettes.
Yeah, no, but I
had to
I
bring
would be
last-
more hesitant of having it in a place like that than an official dispensary.
And it's not going to have fentanyl in it, right? That's the other
Mhm.
thing about this that we're
Yeah,
dodging.
no
right?
fentanyl.
Look at the rates of overdose deaths in America.
The
A
illegal
lot
drug
of it is
trade
because
crazy with fentanyl.
yeah, a lot of it's because they don't think they're doing what they're actually
Wait, I want to
doing.
address average FK. I want to address average FK. So you said 2 points, right? So maybe we'll agree here, right? But basically, I think you said, oh, you'll look at Portugal, and they're having issues or whatever like that, right? But I said before that they slashed their funding for their government oversight program. It's basically, they slashed their funding, and I wrote here, right, from 76 million to 16 million in 2012, and they moved their oversight workforce from the state-based workforce to a non-profit groups-based workforce. And the difference there, right, is that the state-based workforce was, I think, it's just simply more efficient, right? From what I can guess from there.
No, I
guess.
can accept that,
Maybe
but
I
like
can-
I'm asking
yeah.
why did they move that funding? Like, was it
I-
like is it something that if there
it
was this big
seems-
support for it, like why would they just not continue?
I think it's just that their economy went to shit, and they probably had a lot of other things going on. Maybe, I don't know. This is just my guess. But it is a matter of fact. It's just a matter of fact that they fucking like they didn't just slash in half. They didn't just slash in fourth. They slashed it in 6. You know what I mean? Anyway, for the Oregon point, right? For the Portland, Oregon point, or whatever. Like, no, sorry, not the Portland, Oregon point. For the Oregon point, right? Dude, Portland is burning. That's a funny name. Sorry. I'm very manic right now. So I'm on cocaine. Anyway, so the point is
Illegal!
right?
I'm sorry.
Finish your point,
So the
please.
point. Okay. So for the Oregon point, right? You said they're sharing needles and everything is a clusterfuck. The reason nothing worked over there is because they didn't have enough punishment over there. It's because they decriminalized too much shit over there. But then they didn't have enough punishment over there. They should have they implemented everything that Portugal had, but they didn't implement, like, for example, the invite to the rehabilitation centers. They didn't implement.
Did they even
like,
have the funding
fines.
to
They didn't-
put like into these rehabilitation centers?
I don't think so. They basically, I think they basically decriminalized everything, but they didn't have any of the rehab shit, so it was like ridiculous.
So it goes back to like how I'm asking you guys.
Portland, we
How
can
do
hear
Okay,
you
you.
just
get?
real quick, Portland.
Maybe
You
Matt
need to
is a
take
bad
your
idea.
mic and you need to crank it. You need to crank it up because no
Shut
one
up,
can hear
Lactoid.
you. Okay.
I'm just saying.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm more convinced now than I was before.
Second of all, I want to kind of recenter the discussion. It's nice to talk about other countries, right? But other countries are not America. I want to talk about here in the US of A, right? Is decriminalization working where it's been tried? And if we decriminalized harder drugs, would that have desultory effects on society that we're willing to deal with? That's the kind of question. I want to toss it to Portland first. How's Portland doing?
Personally, I'm fine. The city is, as you could probably guess, engulfed in flames at this very moment. Mostly the smoldering ruins of Antifa and their 2020 summer of destruction still, hanging over the city like a dark, shitty cloud. In all seriousness, though, there are some really big pitfalls to decriminalization without the full support of like the police infrastructure that's still going to be necessary to handle the crime that like unfortunately comes as a result of people falling into extreme states of drug abuse that don't choose to go to voluntary rehabs. Unfortunately, we have plenty of rehabs or like resources all over the city, but unless the state is willing to compel them in some way, there's really very little that you can do to keep people who don't want to utilize those services from falling into states of, shanty town residents and habitual like drug dependency. We have a pretty good case for the problems that decriminalization can produce here in the city of Portland right now, where like the resources need to be improved in like emergency response services and police response services, because we have seen a dramatic increase in the amount of overdose deaths year over year since the decriminalization like became official. We're up, I think, 51% in overdose deaths this year from just 2022, and no sign of slowing down. Unfortunately, there's just a really limited amount that the state can do without any sort of compelled like rehab or criminalization. And that's why the mayor has tried to implement levels of local criminalization again for open air fentanyl use at the very least, and still was met with pretty extreme pushback from groups that didn't want to see any sort of penalties imposed or state compelled rehab of any kind. So it's really, really weird to hear people conflate decriminalization of all drugs with like legalization of marijuana. Those two things are like night and day in terms of their impact on the general public, in terms of their legislative kind of their level of like legislative breaking from the norms that we traditionally accept in the United States. And like, by all means, there's some positives to decriminalization that we can still talk about. Like, I don't support the prison industrial complexes packing with nonviolent drug users as just a general principle or on a practical level, but there are ways to handle it that are missed in the conversation here.
I wanna give Kykort a chance to respond first to that. What do you think? If it's not working in Portland, we have an example in the U.S., right, where it's failed. I'll be more blunt. Decriminalization has failed. It is causing worse outcomes across the board.
True. Get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, why would that not be the case just throughout America?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that first of all, Portland is a very specific example where we've seen just the leadership in Portland fail overall. Across the board, where we've seen a lot of large scale things fail in Portland in terms of how we've approached the politics of it. But with that, I would say that it's a case by case basis on how different states will approach decriminalization, and in places like Portland, where we know that it's highly contested with a lot of different outside factors that mitigate when you're talking about drug use. I would maybe argue that it's not it might not be representative of other places in America, other states, other cities that might have a broader use when it comes to decriminalization, and how contested when jails would be less filled with that kind of issue.
What do
Instead
the
of
rest
having
of you
people
think?
go to jail for that when you do recreational drug use.
I mean, you
Well,
can look
when
at
you-
Portland, but you can also look at like Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Or Portugal,
Did
or
Colorado
Illinois.
decriminalize hard drugs? I don't think they did.
Fair enough. So what they have done is they were the first state to legalize marijuana, and a lot of the same predictions that you're talking about were made at the time. You also saw that they're currently either have legalized or they're in the work. I think they already have of psilocybin, right? Magic mushrooms. And again, there's been nothing but benefits so far from that as well. I understand what you're saying. Perhaps this is very specific in that you only have a problem with like meth, heroin, and coke, like the three
there's
really scary
other
ones.
drugs like that, right? That I don't know. I'm not a drug head. I don't know
Sure.
all the variations, but there
Yeah,
are.
I don't
There
either.
there is a group of here's my argument. Okay, that there is a class of drug that should not be decriminalized, should not be legalized because of the potential harms that it does not only to individuals but its use in society, what it creates. Because the people who do abuse it, even if there are a very small amount of people who actually abuse it, the abuse of this drug creates such a problem that we should say, hey, no, we're just taking these off the table. Now, again, I'm not an expert at this. Again, we have some dropouts, so I'm just kind of covering the bases here.
I know.
But things like coke, heroin, and meth are very good examples. Opioids is another example that's devastated Appalachia. It's devastated rural areas, rural America, and in the cities, it's not doing well either, right? It's just been such a devastating pandemic where it not only was legal but pushed on the public through for medicinal purposes and things.
Also,
like that.
when you talk to the
The
people
real
in those
problem
areas,
that,
right? Like all the interviews of the people in Appalachian areas, it always comes down to the same thing. They're not saying like, "Oh, we wish people could do meth in a healthy way." It's like, no, meth is like fucking our communities. These people are doing meth. They're not going to work. They're not like providing for their families. They're not even starting new families. They're like, it's one of two options, right? You either leave Appalachia or you stay there and you do meth, which is like, like I don't see this world where like meth becomes this like congruent part of society that's like helping out these communities where like you can do meth but in a healthy way.
So I hear that, and so I hopefully we have a little bit of time to hammer the freedom point. But if we're talking about like just effects, like just like measurable, like utilitarian brain effects, quick Google: 87.8 of all opioid related overdoses were fentanyl, right? And fentanyl is what's spiked in drugs. It's not what people are intentionally taking. The vast majority of people.
No. Hold on. There are literally fentanyl markets in Portland. It is entirely consumed as like the product that you intend to purchase. Widespread.
Wait, can you turn your mic
where,
up?
Yeah, I'm balancing, trying to not like have you guys come in on the mic. So pardon me. There are literally markets centered on the purchase of fentanyl. To say it's an unintended purchase is just like factually incorrect. It's
people will
very
cut
actively purchased.
My understanding is
fentanyl-
very
fentanyl
often
is-
it's unintended. Like
Very
often.
very often people will overdose because it's unintended, but like one of the issues that happens with fentanyl is people will use it as its own drug because like you can buy a shit ton of fentanyl for pretty cheap in comparison to other drugs and get a much higher high out of it.
Yeah,
Or get a, like,
Also,
there's
when
bigger
I
high
would
out of
say
it.
that. Are you sure? You can go if you need.
I want to ask one question though. If it's legalized and like the actual potency is listed on the product, so it's not like people don't know the potency of what they're using. I mean, do you think this would lead to more overdoses or less overdoses like we saw in Portugal?
So now we're talking legalization, not decriminalization.
That's what I've been in favor of the whole time. Yes.
Yeah, that's a way worse fucking proposition. Regulating and like recreationally selling things like heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine to the general public, it would be an absolute nightmare
And
for
alcohol.
Wouldn't
I mean,
wouldn't
yeah.
you prefer?
Yeah,
Wouldn't
we
you like if
already-
you were going to the drugstore? Wouldn't you prefer like when you buy like I guess a fentanyl canister, it like literally says this percent fentanyl, right? Here
No,
are
I would-
safe instructions. Here's who you
I
call
would
if you
prefer
overdose.
that not be an option. I would not
people-
prefer that. to
It
be
is an option though.
Wait,
you
can't
know
people-
that you're in Portland. Like it is an
No,
option
I
there.
can't walk
Wait,
into a
wait, can't
pharmacy.
people
and say,
kind
You
of
said
find
there's
out, like-
open air drug markets. Like they're not going to
Yeah.
walk into the pharmacy where they know what
Those are
percentage it is.
Wait,
They're going to go to
Lactoid,
some fucking
Lactoid.
skeevy guy where it gets shipped in from China where they don't know what the
Yeah,
fucking
but I
percentage
wanna-
is when they inject
Lactoid.
it.
In
Lactoid.
regard to opioids,
Lactoid, measurably maybe, but like even still, we live in a world right now where you can do whippets. Whippets are measured out in little canisters. You could find all of the data or all of the info for how to do it properly. But guess what? People still fuck up their lives, fuck up their kids' lives, fuck up everyone around them by doing whippets and getting addicted to that shit.
Sure.
Wait,
Okay.
wait,
So
wait,
wait.
wait,
This is a
yeah,
great
no,
example.
but-
So you want to ban whipped cream, motherfucker?
No.
Like
I would still punish people for taking advantage of that little thing and like
buying whipped
going
cream
out of
and
their way
using
every
whippets?
time and getting if you get addicted and you start hurting people around you through your addiction, you should probably be punished for that.
Yes,
and then you
I
should
don't
probably
disagree.
be helped to stop your addiction.
Wait, I don't disagree. I don't. If you commit a crime and the crime is related to anything that you're doing, whether it be drinking, whether it be smoking drugs,
Yeah, but
whether
so
it
it should
be,
also be illegal to do whippets.
yeah.
right?
Hold on,
It should
you're
be-
right. You're right.
you can
if
buy
you,
whipped
if you
cream,
have a
but if we
specific
find out you're
person,
doing
What the
whippets.
fuck are whippets?
no, it's air canister is within whipped cream. Apparently, like I'm not going to describe this because maybe some people don't know what it is. I don't want to tell them. But like, if what I'm saying is that like, if you have somebody who is like committing crimes because they're doing these substances, then of course part of rehabilitation would be you can't do this, right? AODA. If you get fucked up, and
No,
you keep committing
step one
crimes
is you
'cause you're
can't do
drunk,
this. Step
shouldn't
one
be
is
able
if
to
we
buy
see
alcohol.
you. No, step one is if we see you out there using these whipped cream canisters, walking around the streets, going, guess what? Fuck you. You're jail.
Oh, fuck you! What a waste of resources! Hunting down whippets? Come
A
on.
waste of resources.
I don't know-
Punishing
I don't know
people
if you
for
believe
fucking
that.
up,
I don't know if you
degenerating
believe
their
that.
society is a waste of resources.
I don't know
Yes!
if you believe that.
Degenerating society? Look at how you people talk. This is just
You
like fucking,
people?
you people,
Yeah,
all right?
he means
You- and by
Muslims.
you
He
people, I
means
mean the
Muslims
fucking
right now,
nannies.
just so
The
everyone
fucking
knows.
nanny state
Wait,
tyrants.
what?
Right? You want to come to my house and tell me what guns I can have. You want to come into my house, you want to tell me what substances I can
Wait,
use.
Lactoid
It's
has a
complete
point
bullshit,
though, right?
right?
Wait, hold
Wait,
on,
so
has a point
Lactoid,
though,
what? You
right?
don't
Like-
wait,
like
Lactoid,
here-
what? You don't have any guns right now, or do you have any guns that are breaking
Hold on,
regulations?
Lactoid has
huh?
a point though, right? Because if a store like sells drugs and you have to pass through government regulations, doesn't the government have to regulate like the ingredients and like the kinds of like balancing
Yes,
that you
truth
have
in
to do?
No,
advertising.
because the drugs are
Yeah,
the
no, that's why
problem.
we're
You
saying we
guys
should
look at
have
drugs
common
as if there's these
dispensaries.
little funny little
Yes.
things, but they're the problem. The drug in itself is the problem. I don't want a society where we just
Sure.
accept that people like
that's
might just be
true.
doing
No,
like a little
FK,
bit of
yeah,
meth.
that's
You
true,
got it. You
but-
got it. Because the drugs are the problem. It's not
Sure.
the people. That's why we
No,
don't
no, no, no.
decriminalize
The
shit.
people are
you should
funding
have
these
it
drugs.
before this.
You should
No,
get
before
punished for
this.
funding it a little bit, and then
No,
you
no, no, no,
should
no,
have
no, I don't
options
think
for
you
help,
have
but
it
you
for
should just
long.
get a
Oh my
punishment.
God.
Hey,
How
one
much
at a time,
you
one at a
find
time.
people in jail
Kaikort,
for?
go ahead.
Wait, can I talk, please? Can I just give my spiel? And then
Food
you
shops,
guys
you
can
can
go
go
ham.
first.
and
Kaikort,
fucking other
Kaikort,
ass.
then food
Oh, no,
chops.
no, no.
Kaikort, then food chops. That's the order we're going in.
Oh my
Kaikort,
God, I
food
let
So
you
chops.
guys
first,
talk
I
for
want to
so
say
long.
to first, I want
It's
to
been a
support
fucking sausage fest in
Lactoid's.
here. Okay.
I want to support Lactoid's opioid declaration against Portland's how you were describing it because most opioids,
you hate Muslims.
most opioid overdose deaths that happen initially started with medically prescribed opioids. So it's an addiction problem, not a legalization or decriminalization problem.
Wait. What? The opioid deaths is not drug overdoses. Okay, those are two different things that we're talking about here. The increase in drug overdoses is not tied in any way to the broad increase in opioid deaths, which would be like the majority of them being medically prescribed. Those are two completely different statistics.
No, because
Yeah.
if you,
Yeah,
May I
they
finish?
are.
May I
Sure.
finish? No, because if you are getting your medically prescribed opioids and you're told to do a certain amount, and then you get addicted to those, and you overdose due to that, because
You're medically
whatever drugs you're doing. No, I'm being serious, Portland. I'm being serious. And then back to what we're saying about why should you have any right to dictate? If we're doing common sense, having available dispensaries, we're not going to send people to jail for doing drugs.
No. That's
Wait,
so
can I just
wrong.
say-
If we're
I
doing
wanna
common
know.
sense, we're gonna be like, hey,
Food
listen,
chefs.
we get it. Sometimes we don't have to go all out punishing people for doing drugs. But common sense is we don't want drugs to be an acceptable part of our society.
Food chops. Go ahead.
Then shame. them.
Okay. I can actually address everybody's points at once and solve this entire issue. Ready?
Fix us.
So I know. Stop. it's because I know Wick came in and said, "Oh yeah, I don't know why you're addressing other countries, and like this is not relevant to the discussion whatsoever." Okay, all right, you're completely wrong. I haven't tell you why. Okay, the reason we look at Portugal is because like one of the most inspiring things of why Oregon did its shit in the first place was because of Portugal. Okay, all right, but when we look at Portugal, okay, all right,
How's that working out for Oregon?
When you have government and then you can regulate the things, you can regulate the ingredients, right? Because you don't want some like motherfucking Chinese person, right, selling you some weird ass shit and then having like the ingredients be completely unbalanced and sneak in a little bit of fentanyl and then overdose somebody, right? Because when you have like government regulation and you actually balance it right, then no one's gonna get overdosed and they die from like cartinol or some shit like that, from like horse tranquilizer. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, but we're not selling it in stores, right? Because I know that is what average FK's concern is, right? We're not going to sell it in stores. So instead, we're going to do it in rehabilitation programs, because if you go cold turkey, you're going to die. If you go cold turkey, you're going to die. So what you're going to do is that you invite them to rehabilitation programs, right? You fund rehabilitation programs, okay? You put the tax dollars in that shit, okay? Except as you whittle them off, as you give them heroin and you get them whittle them off like bit by bit, that thing is going to be balanced right. That's going to be balanced right, okay?
I'm tired of playing the nice guy throughout this debate. If you go cold turkey, if you go cold turkey from a drug and die, that's natural selection at this point. I've seen people quit. I've seen people quit drugs and be fine. If you go cold turkey from a drug and die, that is your fault. You deserve death.
Into the fucking camera, you're actually insufferable, okay? I know whenever you do that, Lactoid is over there and his boner's hard, okay? But he can't stand you, okay? All right, you need to stop doing that.
Why bring me into this? What the fuck?
The entire thing, I can see you fucking cringing every single time you vape into the camera, okay? Look at Portland. Look at him. He has gone through so many.
I'm not vaping. I'm going down to the Benjamin town.
I live in California and I worry for Portland and I worry for Oregon, because Oregon is my sister. And I care for Oregon. Oregon is a beautiful state, okay? We need to bring the glory of Oregon back.
I'm from Texas. We punish druggies.
Dude, Texas is a dumbass, okay? Texas is a dumbass.
It's a beautiful state. I walk the streets,
dude,
and when I walk the streets of Texas, not once do I worry about some fucking heroin zombie walking down.
Up your ass the size of East Texas, and it's bigger than the
Okay.
stick that you're
Okay.
smoking right now.
Okay. Again, to say that they won't sell this stuff over the counter or in stores, I mean, they are. According to Portland, they have over the counter dispensaries and things like that. Is that correct?
No.
That's
Fentanyl. There are things. Just Google it. There are things called fentanyl markets. They're like pop-up, basically fucking tent markets that people will.
Oh,
set
sure,
up
like
in
yeah, I get you. Okay,
little
that's not a.
They're
illegal.
gangs. They're
See,
gangs.
it's like a wet market.
They're illegal.
Yes,
It's gangs.
they're illegal. But
Yes.
the people who set them up and the people who are charged with sale of fentanyl to the general public,
Wait,
they
isn't selling all
routinely are
drugs
released
illegal?
within like a couple of days to a couple of months. They have very, very low level penalties for even like multiple time repeat offenders for distribution and sale of, small amounts of fentanyl.
It's not even just.
Obviously can provide a pretty significant amount of street availability to a lot of people, and fentanyl's potency means that has a tremendous amount of like potential to cause harm.
Where do
So-
those profits go when those drug dealers, where do they get their drugs from, and where do the profits go from the sale? Right. That's the question.
Lactoid, my preferred solution would not be to like make competitive institutions to fight the drug dealers for their business, but rather just to like put the repeat drug dealers into longer periods of incarceration so they don't have the opportunity to feed our streets with hard drugs.
So wait, no, this is why I asked the question. Because I understand what you're saying, right? But
I know.
we are north of a narco state. That is only a narco state because of our laws, right? The fact that Mexico is as shitty as it is, the fact that it's a failed government, is because the cartels have taken over. And where do those cartels get their money? They sell it to gangs in America. And those gangs exist. What is their primary way of making profit? How do the Bloods make profit? How do the Crips make profit? The Latin Kings, all these groups, they make profits by selling drugs. Right? That's the main form of income. Like if you
Okay.
legalize drugs tomorrow, There goes the gangs in America.
I know.
There goes
Exactly.
the cartels.
That's a good
Black
thing.
Bear,
The
I'll
illegal
give you
drug
a
trade-
separate solution. I'll give you a separate solution. You make all
What's
people
wrong with
who
my
use drugs.
solution? What's wrong
You
with
make
my
all
solution?
people who use drugs
Yours.
mandatory reporters, and they're forced, if they don't tell us who's selling them drugs, if they don't drop that type of information, all they're doing is hurting the nation around them. And then they should be punished for not giving us
You've
that
just
information.
you've just like criminalized drug possession in a more
Yeah.
way.
Wow,
I
you just
mean, like,
created
I
a terrorist
understand.
state. Wow, you
Yeah.
just created a terrorist
Yeah.
state.
Let's-
Wow.
let's
Just
make
like
the
you
users
communist
nuts on there.
description
Sure.
of-
A terror state? Oh, it's like saying, "Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, you
you
can't rape
have.
children. If
You
you rape
have
children,
told
it's
paranoid
mandatory."
and
Yeah,
anxious
guess
people
what
you
else
made
I would
them
say?
even
I
more
would say if you
paranoid
have
and
information that a
anxious.
child
You're
is being
already on
abused,
drugs and you made
you're
them even
mandatorily
more
reporting it.
paranoid. Why would you do that? You're so
$2,
stupid.
$2 from Adarius to say thank you for reading this comment, Wick. You're welcome. $2 from PDX Pleb to say, what about plants these drugs come from?
I think we should wipe those plans from the
Tell
face
that
of the earth.
commenter that's a dumbass comment. Sorry.
I think we should-
Criminalize the
Don't
plant.
even-
Legalizing nature.
We should.
It's fucking
What I
disgusting.
want to
We do
legalize
legalize
is
parts of
super
nature.
chat.
Guess what else?
What I would love to legalize is super chatting and subbing to the channel and throwing bits for this whatever
That's a
this
weird
is
salute.
today.
That's a
That'd
weird
be
salute.
great.
That was kind of
Um,
weird, Wick. What was that?
It is what it is.
Wait, should we
I-
fucking-
my- my-
would you
my problem
legalize
here-
murder
my-
just because it's
Stop,
natural?
stop. My problem here with the side that is arguing for legalization or decriminalization is that, again, what effect is this going to have on society? We can see, again, that it's just going to make the community, people are going to be less safe. They're going to want to live here less. And we can look at this because historically, do you guys know in the 80s that Reagan, of all people, lowered the age limit for drinking alcohol? It went from 21 to 18. He lowered that. What happened? What happened?
A lot
Drunk
more
driving
DUI deaths.
and other incidences of alcohol abuse skyrocketed. They went up by a lot. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it was enough
Are you guys
that
pro drunk driving?
within 2 or 3 years they repealed that and brought it back because it was just creating such a big problem. So when
Because
you decriminalize or
18-year-olds are
legalize,
How does that correlate
wait,
to the current?
just when you decriminalize, but this is the part I'm going to explain to you. When you decriminalize or legalize or make the restrictions, legal restrictions, less on certain hard drugs, why would we see anything different in America?
But
I
Obviously,
get
it
what
would
you're
be the
saying.
same.
I get what you're saying, but you're talking about the
Preach.
age
No,
lowering.
let's talk about the
You're
80s.
age thing. Because guess what? 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 20 and 21 years old are literally kids. They're kids. Okay, they're dumbasses. When I was a 19-year-old, do you know what I was doing? I was fucking a hole in the wall. Okay, I was fucking a
Stop
cocoa nut.
yelling
Okay,
so
I don't know
much.
why you were doing that.
You're the story. I read that Reddit
What?
story.
Oh, okay.
I read the coconut
well,
story.
Okay.
What? Why are you pointing
Maybe
at me like
maybe
that?
we should outlaw coconuts because that shit happened.
You said you fucked the coconut. Have you never read the Reddit story?
I don't care about the Reddit story. Go on, Locktoy.
Wait. When you bring up in the 80s, first of all, I take a little bit of contention with, it was so terrible they just didn't know what to do, so they had to kick it back up to 21. I think a lot of it had to do with a lot of the anti-drug, a lot of the anti-drug rhetoric for
What's
drugs
happening?
occurred a little bit beforehand. But then here's the other thing, right? There's another example in news history where we also regulated alcohol, as in illegalized it. And tell me, Wick, what was the result of that?
Well,
Oh
it
my
was
God,
not
so many
very
women were
good,
happy.
right?
No, it was
We
good.
saw
So many women were
gangs.
happy.
We saw unsafe products.
Yeah, because
We saw-
that's not the fault of deregulating alcohol. That was the fact that our government was just interconnected with these fucking gangs because it was a loose era. But if we had strict up those fucking positions, if we made sure our government didn't have these tied connections with these gangs or these mafia members,
Yeah.
we could have punished it. And guess what? At the end of the
Because
day,
we're doing
those
so good at
women,
that now.
those women would continue to get to go home, being like, you know what? It is the 30s, but guess what? My husband isn't beating the shit out of me. I'm happy.
Yeah, but-
Like I'm living a good
How
life.
does it that way?
That was in the
I
30s.
am
When
such
was
your
prohibition
position,
again?
right? How does that
And
feel, huh?
Specifically in relation to Portland's point about the fentanyl trades or whatever we're talking about in Portland, if we decriminalize drugs, I'm almost certain they would probably go down because the root of drug trafficking is the illegal use of those
Wait,
drugs that are being
We should kill
No,
cartel
it's the
members.
sale of drugs, which is a lot easier to
Bro.
accomplish when
No,
it's
if
been,
it's
when the
legal,
possession of them
then
has been
it's fine.
decriminalized.
No, but we're talking about, you know what drug traffickers do? They drive
Why
up
have-
violence, they drive up murder committed in these places.
Would
like
you be
Portland.
against lining up our military at the border to clear out drug trafficking?
Would
God
you be?
damn it.
Yeah.
You guys are fucking idiots. Kai Cord, can I ask you a
Do
question?
you really
What
think they just
specific-
break
Hey,
the
let
walls?
Portland go. Let Portland go. Let Portland go. Portland, go ahead.
You said earlier that decriminalization in Portland has had such bad results because of some other failures, but you didn't name anything specific. Can you name some specific things that you think are the reasons that decriminalization has had objectively disastrous effects on the city of Portland so far that you would point to as like the actual causal factors and not just the widespread use of
And before
drugs
you
in the
answer that,
streets?
$2 from Adarius to say women be less capable. Thank you for the $2.
True.
Dude, which
true,
Darius
true,
is
King.
this? What the fuck?
King, send
Portland.
$5.
I would.
meme.
Yeah, so I would relate that to how the police system in Portland is and how they don't really focus too much on the drug traffickers. I think that's another reason why the drug trade in Portland is so large as it is right now. They're focusing on finding the individual people who are doing the drugs as opposed to cracking down on the drug traffickers themselves.
No. They're literally not. Like, we decriminalized drug use in Portland. We're not arresting people for individual drug use. What do you mean,
I
Portland
know.
police
I'm
are-
saying we would be putting them in treatment if the Portland government handled this. When police officers see people doing drugs, they would like what food shops said earlier about how we.
Wait, so you want
Food
compelled
stamps was
treatment.
crazy.
Yeah,
No, about
you want
giving
those
about
police to
allowing them to
compel
fine, either
treatment.
get a fine or either getting them treatment, something to
Okay,
help
that's
them make sure they
criminalization.
don't do it. Yes,
That's criminalization.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So they're
Okay,
not
okay,
doing a good
okay.
enough
I
job.
think we're having a
between your
disconnect.
policies?
I want to build this bridge here because you guys are saying the same things but differently. So what? First of all, PDX pleb for $12. It doesn't matter what side of the drug war you are on if you don't acknowledge horticulture as part of the drug war. You're just being naive. We have plants like San Pedro that are in a legal gray area. But to bridge this gap, so what Portland here is saying, Portland is saying that by forcing people to go to rehab, compulsing them to do, that is a form of criminalization. Is that correct?
I agree with that.
I actually,
Yeah.
Because if you don't do the mandatory thing, what happens? So in Kaikord's world,
Thank
right,
you.
where you've made it so they
Mhm.
mandatory rehab. What happens if they don't go?
they would.
We nicely
they'd get
send a
fined.
cop to grab
They're
them
not
by
gonna.
their
They're not
neck.
gonna go to jail. They'll like. I'd probably go back to the fine
Wait,
system.
just a
where-
fine?
They get
But
a
what happens if
strongly
they don't pay
worded
the
letter.
fine? What happens if they don't
You
pay the
muted
fine?
yourself, Portland.
If they don't
Oh,
get,
Portland's
they don't
fine
pay the
is
fine,
fine,
then
yeah.
they would be getting arrested for that, for not paying the fine, not for.
So
not
at the-
doing drugs.
wait. So then wait. So if they don't pay the fine, do we just send them to jail for not paying a fine, or do we give them that rehab afterwards?
Yeah, I know, but
Or
you
do we
don't-
go like, no, you're going to jail for not paying the fine. You don't get
can
the rehab.
endlessly gain fines for something that you're not doing.
So do we just endlessly put them in jail for fines, or at any point do we give this person the rehab they need? And
We
that
give them the
rehab would
they need.
involve.
We force them into rehab.
Oh, so we force them at some point. So what's the
Yes.
difference between what anything you guys were saying and my policy, which is just we fund these prisons better. We go like,
Don't say you
listen,
guys.
you already have these. Yeah, you guys. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, what's the difference between
You can direct
like
me.
all of this policy here, any of the policies recommended, and just being like, listen, we continue to fund these prisons. Maybe we fund them better and demand that they like do other things with their funding. And at the end of the day, if you're on drugs and you have like an addiction, somebody pulls up, grabs you by your neck, and goes, "You're going to prison, and you're gonna get this you're gonna get this help you need."
Yeah, we're not gonna. Well, they're gonna get the help they need. They will hopefully go through a program and be able to.
You're saying hopefully. I'm saying make
So-
them.
so
I'm saying
Portugal
like you
added
make them
time
until
to
they're
drug
fine.
panels.
Well,
They have drug panels
when
where
I
you
said-
are
Aw,
forced to
they have
show
their
up.
kid with them.
No, when I said hopefully, I would be saying we're gonna make them go, but hopefully they would be recovered by.
And
the
if
time
you
that they
don't
get
show
out.
up to drug panels, you will be arrested.
So that's just
True.
criminalization. That's what it is.
You guys
It's-
are still
No,
criminalizing
it's
drugs. You guys are
criminalization
just saying
with
it
extra
nicer.
steps, which
Is
is what I
rehab
supported
criminalization?
this entire time.
Hey,
Sorry,
you're
this is
still
what my
muted
take
on
was
your end,
different.
Portland, by the way.
I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Like if
This
it's
is-
just
this is what my
extra
take
steps,
was the
I'm fine
entire
with the
time.
extra steps. But like,
No, but there's a difference. You were literally advocating for hunting down people who glizzy in their mouth on the streets or some shit. I don't know what you were talking about.
what did I say? What?
For like frosting in their mouth.
Oh yeah,
Whippets.
if they
Did you
if they're
really
doing
fuck a
whippets,
coconut,
yeah,
dude?
if they're on the streets doing whippets, it's like if they're on the streets drinking alcohol, kill them. I'm sorry, no, I'm kidding. That's crazy. That's wild. That's wild. That's out of pocket in a video game.
Okay,
Okay.
okay,
You wanna see that
Duterte.
pig again?
Fucking,
Okay.
I don't know this.
I
is
want
the
to
Philippines.
reground this in reality
I
a
wanna
little bit.
record exactly what you said and post it.
Okay, I want to reground this into
I'm gonna send
reality.
it to Destiny.
Well, I need to mention one thing.
Please.
Chatter, what am I going to say? Forcing people to go to rehab has dramatically lower success rates than people going voluntarily. Like, to the
I feel
point
like we
where-
just don't keep them in there long enough.
So, but which is more effective? Someone who doesn't go to
Honestly, sorta
rehab at
true.
all, or someone who's forced into rehab? Because
The
we
very rare-
I would assume there's
Also, the
some-
way we
just
do
the
rehab is
just real
bad.
quick, the variables that we have to compare aren't the people who go voluntarily versus the people who go forcefully. That's not who we're talking about. What we're talking about is the people who don't go at all. That's what we got to compare it to, right? The people who don't go at all and instead just go and fuck shit up.
Wait. I found one study that it's only 2% success.
Dude, these people who are like these people we're talking about, these people who are like actually addicted, like fucked, their whole life is fucked. It's built around like getting their next hit. These people, it's not just rehab. Rehab to them isn't just like you go into a building and stay there for like a couple weeks and you get better, right? Rehab to them is how the fuck do you rebuild your whole life? What is it even like to live a normal life? How do you get yourself on like some type of normal schedule? What are the skills that you've like developed that like you might be able to use for jobs? You like the reality is, I think the best way to do it is through prison. It's funding these systems because you're trying to rebuild these people's lives. You're trying to put them in an environment where you can like kind of control for like external factors and help them like take those next steps.
And
Hey,
it's
if you
not
get
just
arrested
their
for
life.
heroin
Just
use-
real quick, Kycord, then you can go next. Again, it's not just their life that is being ruined. Drug addicts ruin the lives of their families. They ruin the lives of their friend groups. They ruin everyone around them. Everything they touch turns to dust and ash. It is a terrible
too.
thing.
Sorry.
It creates burdens on all of these groups that we can't just ignore as if they're only hurting themselves. They're not only hurting themselves. Kycord, go.
Yeah, no, FK, to your point, I want to say that when you just don't do anything at all, it's much worse. We need to, if we bring someone to rehab and we help them get back and accumulate in society, if you send someone to jail, how many heroin addicts do you see come out of jail free from heroin? They're not addicted to heroin anymore, are able to get a job as easily as they would have before they went to jail. At least if you decriminalize it and allow them to go to therapy, allow them to go to rehab, increase funding for those places in cities like that, at least they don't have that criminal charge on them. And when they turn their life around, if they turn their life around, they're able to get that job that they want. They won't have the effect of, having this charge laid down on them for being a convicted felon for using heroin or distributing heroin.
But it's not just it's not just them, the user, that we have to be. It's not just the addict that we have to worry about and society should care about. It's society. Society should care about the commune, the whole, as well as the individual. And so while, yes, get them the help they need, but it cannot be at the expense. It cannot be at the expense of the victims of these addicts, right? It cannot, because that's what happens when you just do not deter this enough. And I guess I'll ask you this. Do you think that prison is a deterrent?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, of course prison's a deterrent.
Okay, so why would we not want
so
to
is re-
deter people from becoming into becoming addicts in the first place? Like, why don't we just we not want to say, hey, not only will you fuck your life up, but the daddy government's going to come in and make sure that you go to jail for a while.
Because why would I wouldn't want anyone to, for those I would still try it, for those who might be pushed into peer pressure, for those who might end up accidentally taking fentanyl and then failing a test when they
Okay, I don't look, if someone accidentally takes a drug, that's different than look, we don't usually criminalize accidents as much. Not usually.
Been arrested for
I don't know
accidentally
who said
taking
it
drugs.
before, but coupling prison with a rehab program sounds pretty good. But
Yeah, I mean,
It was me. It was me,
maybe.
based.
We have
Or
that.
you
never mind. I
do.
changed my mind. You suck. I changed
No,
my mind.
I hate you.
Or
Why?
or you do this, or we do what we did to drop smoking rates from, which is nicotine's one of the most addictive drugs out there. We did to drop smoking rates from nearly half of Americans in 1950 and 60, all the way down to what is it, 14% today. We never criminalized it. We never illegalized it. We just educated people a lot on the possible ramifications
Yeah, but
that
that's a
come to you
slow term. That's a
from
long
cigarettes.
time. Yeah.
Yes,
but that's a
yes,
long term.
this involves some. Yeah, I think this is a much like
Factoid,
long term.
would it
It's
or
a
would
much
it not
better
drop the
idea.
rates lower if we just stopped stores from selling cigarettes?
Sure, I don't disagree. If you want to turn the country into a police state, you could probably eliminate all use of any substance.
Yeah, but then
honestly.
cartels will start.
We could put
selling
cameras in your fucking
cigarettes,
in your
bro.
bedroom
Yeah.
to make sure
Yeah.
that you're not taking the fucking drugs.
Yeah.
We could do all that.
Because guess
but
what?
if we really
There's
wanted
things
to.
we know that are better
But-
for you.
But I endorse the idea of, hey, we managed to drop cigarette smoking a tremendous amount while not stomping on people's rights and freedoms.
Yeah,
Which
why
I think,
do you-
and
why
by the
would you
way,
do that
I
right
think
now?
compulsory drug treatment sort of does that. I haven't seen compelling evidence that it actually works, as actually like provides any kind of benefit.
I gotta go break.
So I almost wonder if that just sort of like is prison, but
Okay.
by another name.
Okay, couple things. $2 from Adarius. Adarius, you keep super chatting for $2, which I appreciate. Let's add a 0 onto that for one of these, please. Okay,
What
Adarius for
the-
$2. That's the cutest baby I've ever seen. Fair enough.
Toronto's confirmed.
$10 for Temperate Takes. Whether you build a rehab center or turn a prison into a rehab center, they're both rehab centers. Once you turn a prison into a rehab center, it's no longer a prison. And well, I would
What?
disagree on that, but $2 from Adarius. What does Lactoid think about the 94 crime bill?
Have you ever seen a Nordic?
Adarius
prison?
said that.
That shit's crazy.
Adarius.
That shit
I'm
looks like a hotel room.
I'm against any kind of I'm against strengthening laws against like nonviolent activities, including like loitering, right? But I am totally in favor of making much like stricter laws on violent crime. And I think that if we actually punished like addicts for the other illegal shit that they did, like we would solve the problem without infringing upon the rights of the peaceful addicts, right? The people who are not, or the recreational non-addicts, right? That's the point. But to the extent that we're like throwing murderers in jail for very long periods of time, or people who keep like 3 strikes, who keep committing violent crimes over and over again, I don't have very much sympathy for violent criminals at all.
Here's the
The
thing.
recreational mother
Here's the
who
thing.
keeps getting
The
drunk in front of her
reason,
child.
the reason I am more hesitant to send like people who like drugs addiction and stuff like that to American prisons, because American prisons are like generally just, I don't know, like they just feel more brutal, I guess. I don't know, but yeah.
So once again, right? Even if prison's nice, right? I want to take on Temperate Take's take here, because I do think that if you make someone live in a place that's compulse them to do so, compulsory, that's still prison. It might be a nice prison, a fancy prison, a comfortable prison, but a prison it remains.
That person wants to do drugs.
Addicts are
Wait, what?
already prisoners. That's a good point too. Addicts are prisoners to themselves. What we're just doing is removing them from the streets so that they can't hurt other people. And why are
No.
we against keeping people who, again, have a huge potential to hurt
Huge.
others away from potential victims? I just don't understand it.
It's not only that, Wick, it's also cheaper just to convert these prisons into centers, right? You already have like a confined area. You have a location where you have like a population that is like, they have no other choice, right? They're gonna be there. You have the capability, because you have the staff to make sure that this is safe for like medical professionals to do what they need to do. At this point, I just see it as like all you got to do is fund it a bit more to maybe like build out separate sections of the prison for only drug use, and then fund it more so they get better medical care.
Based.
Okay, so we're all good with a compulsory prison if it's nice. Is that the
No,
consensus? No, why
Wait,
not?
Why not? Why can't we have
It's
nice
not the
prisons?
consensus. Throwing people in prison for not harming people is not for if they commit crimes.
Well, yeah,
sure,
yeah, but
make them
if-
work. I'm good on that. Right, make them work. Right,
Being an
Make them work.
addict is a harm to the people around you.
Hold on. When you say being an addict is a harm to the people around you, what do you mean by that?
If you yourself, right, have an addiction to drugs such as like heroin,
Wait, hold on. I don't have the exact
marijuana,
same take as
Let me
them.
finish.
alcohol,
Let me finish.
anything
Yeah.
else, right? you are in turn going to be causing issues, and issues such as like interpersonal issues. You're going to be causing like a detrimental harm to the people around you because the version of you that you're selling to them isn't really you. It's this altered state of you, and it's a state that has a dependency due to other issues you've never been able to deal with. And like, I mean, if you could prove that you don't have any issues and you're just this magical addict who only has like a special addiction that's not causing a harm in your life, maybe, but I find that hard to believe. I think
Okay.
in most cases, when you're an addict, you are causing harm.
Okay.
Let me respond to this real quick. So I understand what you're saying. I think that you do have examples of functional addicts, but regardless, I will agree with you that we probably should socially discourage any kind of substance abuse and fast food and all the bad shit, because generally speaking, it probably doesn't have the best effects for people. I don't deny that. But that being said,
Prison is just a strong
when you're
form of
talking about
social
harm,
discouragement.
no, it's not. When you're talking about harm, right? I am only particularly interested in harm if it's violating somebody else's rights. In the same way of you could have somebody who gets fucked up every night, let's say, but like they are as much of a dick to their family as a sober guy is to their family, but the sober guy is just a dick, right? I'm not in the business of regulating other people's personality to try to optimize how nice they are or optimize how, friendly and easygoing they are. That's not my prerogative. My prerogative is merely to, you can do what you want until you start fucking with other people's
So
shit.
you keep
and
saying,
if you fuck with,
yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that how we
Lactoid,
punish all
just
crime?
People
real quick,
shit by draining the family's money, right?
okay, if you're
Lactoid.
stealing their money, then we throw you to prison for that.
Lactoid.
You're
You
not
keep
stealing
mentioning,
them. You're just.
you keep mentioning like social stigma, right? You keep like, oh, we reduced cigarette use through social stigma. Social stigma doesn't always work, right? We used to socially stigmatize a lot of things that have become mainstream today, right? When we see this social issues and things like that, we used to socially stigmatize Black people, right? Obviously, we criminalize them as well, but then we decriminalize them, and then we socially stigmatize them for a while. And they.
Was it good to decriminalize Black people,
Yes,
Wick?
absolutely.
Okay, good.
Maybe.
All right.
But I'm
Yes,
just
yes, it was.
demonstrating
I
to
have
you
I
that
don't know about that, Wick. I don't know if we
social
should have Black people
stigmatization
decriminalized.
doesn't always work. So my question is, when
Personally,
you
I'm racist.
socially stigmatize something, these drugs, these hard drugs, then we decriminalize it, then we socially stigmatize it to reduce it. Doesn't work. What then?
Yeah, okay, so
At what point do we say,
Sure.
okay, daddy government, come in?
Yeah.
Put
I
the
haven't
foot
heard. I haven't heard the Black person take before. I'm generally want to focus on things that we should socially stigmatize because, like, we should. And cigarettes are. A great
Would you say
example
you
of
should
that.
socially stigmatize parts of Black culture?
Absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you want to get into, we can turn this into like a racial discussion. But within
Boring.
sure. Quick example. Within Black culture, there seems to be a like sort of hyper masculinity and a cultural acceptance of violence that does exist within that culture that I think should be socially stigmatized and should be deprioritized. Am I wrong? Is that like a bad thing to say? We should obviously, but I'm not going to criminalize somebody like liking that or criminalize someone's ideas or what they happen to do in their spare time as long as they're not infringing upon the rights of other people.
Well, what about like rap music? Do you think you should be allowed to charge people based on like?
This is a great example. Wait. This is actually a great
criminalization
example
of it?
because there's plenty of studies that show both violent video games and rap music are strongly correlated with commission of violence. And there's been numerous studies done that like exposing people to this shit beforehand actually increases their aggression following. That's 100% correct. I'm not wrong.
Average
on that.
FK coming inside.
But there's
come
plenty
on
of
my
people. There's plenty of people who play violent video games or listen to rap music and don't
FK,
commit
you look like
crimes.
a gamer.
So I'm curious, Wick. Wick, if I could prove to you, this is a question for you, Wick. If I could prove to you, and through studies that I may very well have, that rap music is directly correlated with violence, and in fact, lab studies seem to indicate that it might cause aggression. Wouldn't you be in favor, for the benefit of society, to get rid of rap music?
There's a scale
Yes.
here.
What?
There's a scale
Okay,
here of
sure.
potential danger.
It doesn't
right?
hit the threshold. Sure.
It doesn't hit the threshold. Whereas
Weed doesn't
something like
either.
Coke, weed doesn't hit
It
the
does.
threshold.
And magic
right?
mushrooms don't either. And LSD doesn't
LS
either. And
Well, it
and
depends.
most drugs.
It depends. Psilocybin specifically. It depends. I'm less sure about that one. I think there's so many
literally
benefits
stories
to
of
it.
people killing their
I know.
families.
There's
on
so
it,
many
though.
benefits to it for
Same
PTSD
with rap music.
victims and things like that. Medical benefits, I'm saying that I don't know about that one. I don't know enough about psilocybin specifically. But when we talk about things like heroin and meth, absolutely, it has devastated communities.
I
right?
would just say the magnitude is just not that high. That's it.
Which is why
The
Sure.
magnitude
Wait,
is just
let-
not
let-
that
let-
high.
So yeah,
Women
rap
say
music
that
and violent video
decriminalizing-
games do not have the same effect, right, in
Okay,
scale
stuff like
as a meth addict, right?
Well, would you say something like TikTok did, considering TikTok literally had whole trends of kids fucking up their schools just for trends?
Okay, low-key, you're really based, but like I'm actually very surprised. I very much like how you've been handling this debate, but I first of all, I'll answer your question first. Yeah, I do think TikTok has had a lot of social stigma against it that is not necessarily negative, but I don't think we should be banning TikTok overall, not across the board at least.
The stigmatization of TikTok also
We
has
have
not
to ban
worked.
a lot of
to be
other things
clear.
as well. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well,
You want to
man,
ban rap
Yeah,
music?
finish.
yeah, no, with Lactoid's point, I agree heavily with how he's approaching the social stigma aspect of drug use, because I do think once you decriminalize it, we're not advocating for drugs. We're not legalizing it. We're not advocating for drugs. No one should be. I don't really. In fact, I don't do drugs at all. I don't do weed. I don't do any soft drugs. I don't smoke cigarettes. But I don't think that anyone should be arrested, especially when we know more or less that those who are arrested for drug use, a lot of them have been one or dones. A lot of them have been in high proportion to different communities than other communities. It's something that I find to be a very difficult question to say that we should legalize to say that we should to say that drug use is something that we should be arresting people for. And that's why I support the decriminalization of it. So, and I think a better example, which we talked about it earlier in the debate, was alcohol, because I do think alcohol is something that we've seen the long-term effects of. We've seen how it's treated us, and we've brought up in many different scenarios. But I do want to say that I don't think a lot of drugs, including type A drugs, like hard drugs, are as bad as alcohol. I don't think that, like, I think we should have alcohol be on the same level as this. I don't know
Well,
why we don't criminalize
The
alcohol.
the issue with alcohol, and the reason that I would argue that it is so bad, is the ease of access and the lack of criminal penalties. I do think we should regulate alcohol more than we do now. Maybe a hot
Yes.
take, maybe something people won't like, but I do
It's a good
think
take.
that the
It's a base
How,
take. Good
how
job,
would you
Blake.
do it? How would you do it?
I don't
Yeah, I would love
have
to hear
any
that.
specific advocacy at this point, right? I don't think I have any specific, like, oh well, because we regulate it a little depending on times, like you can't buy it after certain times, right, on certain days, etc. And we regulate around motor vehicles and things like that. But I think that, like, having some sort of penalty, harsher penalties if you get drunk, like much like a hate crime, right? Appending a hate crime onto an actual crime will increase the severity of what you get. I think that if you are drunk or high while committing a crime, your penalty should increase as well, right? So, for example, if you are domestically abusing your partner, if alcohol is involved, your penalty should be harsher. Does that make sense?
I don't think I understand what you're saying. I just don't see like why it necessarily makes sense. I understand like you could maybe match like the punishment could be aimed at treating, like, if the goal is any kind of rehabilitation, you would want to like try to resolve the alcoholism and remove access to that if that's what's leading them to do the bad action that they've already been convicted of, right? But if you, let's say you have somebody who's like sober and beating the shit out of their wife, I'm actually kind of more scared of this person because
Wouldn't
they've
that
shown
be
a
worse? Yeah.
yeah, they've shown a propensity to do this even when we don't like we can't just take away the alcohol from them. They're doing it anyway. Like,
There's
holy
no
shit, this
altered
person's
mindset.
crazy.
They're consciously doing it, but when you're under the
Yeah.
influence, you're more prone
Well,
to
the
more
goal
suggestive
of
ideas,
the
right?
goal of this, and again, this is just off the cuff, right? Again, like I said, I don't have specifics to advocate for, so it could be a really stupid idea. I'll admit that could be a stupid idea, but my goal here is simply to make alcohol less accessible. I think that it should be harder for stores to get a license to sell alcohol. The penalties
And
for
bars.
stores violating, like selling to minors, etc., should be even higher than they are. And I don't think it should be as easy to get alcohol as it is right now in America today. I can order it online. I
Sure,
can
if
think
you
have
want
it delivered to my
In
house.
the most
fair
I
enough.
think the most realistic policy you get out of that is literally having just an ID system and having a tracking system where it's like every store that sells alcohol, you can track where that can comes from, what store, and who it was sold to.
That seems like a lot of investment to put on.
I mean, it's a
every
lot, but that's like the best
single
way to punish it, right?
can.
That's
Well,
like
alcohol has been so terrible for society. I think I think we are underselling what would, like, if alcohol disappeared, if I could snap my finger and make alcohol disappear, the benefits, both health-wise, societal-wise, and on all levels, the benefits we would see would be immense. Immense.
That's true with every unhealthy activity.
Yeah, but we
Not to the
probably
same
should be-
extent, though, right?
No. I think to a more if tomorrow, like if tomorrow we lost the ability to synthesize high fructose corn syrup from corn for some reason, like the overall health of America would increase far greater than removing any single illicit substance by far.
I feel like the process of synthesization of like that chemical would be very useful for humanity.
What?
I feel like it has other uses.
The
I feel
Trib
like
one-
that whole process.
No,
just
high
has other
fructose corn
uses.
syrup makes like corn-based
Yeah,
sweeteners.
but I mean,
Sure,
it's like,
the
it's not
Trib
only
one
use
for
of that
$2
process.
says, I think the solution is more cops for real, no cap on a what? I don't know.
True,
He didn't
true,
Spanish
true.
out.
That
Thank
makes
you,
it
thank you.
stupid.
But let me answer you, because again, if I snap my fingers and got rid of high fructose corn syrup, right? Yeah, health benefits would improve, but I think that that's not the same level as what would happen. Like no one beats their wife because they had too much high fructose corn syrup.
They might not.
No
beat
one
their wife.
goes
Oh, wait,
in
hold on.
drunk.
No,
They
that's
might
wrong.
not. Wait.
Wick, There's a
They might-
lot of
Wait.
relationships
Hold on,
that
you
are
want to be careful.
very.
You want to be careful. You want to be careful, right? Because once you snap your fingers enough times, you're gonna take away a lot of enjoyment in life as well. Okay, like that's a measure that typically people don't really factor in because they're like, oh, let's weigh like the health benefits or whatever benefits. But like, if you sure, with alcohol you can make a far stronger argument because I would actually agree with you, right? But with something like high fructose corn syrup or like sugar, like sure, you can make an argument that on the net benefits are like positive, right? But at the same time, it's like, man, a life without sugar, is that a life worth living? You know what
But
I mean?
could you-
Wait, you wouldn't miss it.
Could you
because
make the
wouldn't know what
argument-
it'd be like?
Could you
We
make
would
the
have
argument that at the bare
lots of
minimum,
arguments.
considering that's
I
like
just assume like it's in the middle of my life, and I
Oh,
knew
we
what sugar
would
was like
forget. We would forget.
Hold on.
Okay.
no. Could you make the
Oh.
argument though that like
In that case, fuck
even
it.
if not like, okay, we're gonna get rid of sugar right now because it's so ingrained in our lives. Could you at least make the argument that we should probably have expectations for these companies not to be selling like extremely high sugar
This is so
products?
fucking stupid.
Then we should put
have
Choo-choo
regulations,
children,
like
sure.
Portland's back,
countries put
Portland's back. I wanna
regulations, so why
give-
not us?
I want to give Portland a chance now that he's done with his family business.
We have an organization in the United States called the FDA. We have similar organizations in basically every modern country in the world that we empower to regulate not only what can go into different kinds of food, but in what amounts. There are different standards in different countries, and we're acting like changing those standards in this country would just be this fucking crazy thing. It sounds like Lactoid, ironically enough, is arguing for an expansion of the FDA to do more to police the kind of food people can eat, which is
Based.
a weird stance from him. I appreciate it, but I don't find it like congruent with the rest of what I know about his philosophy. So I may have misheard him. But
What are you talking?
sounds
No,
like-
no. What are you talking about? I'm
Actually,
not.
more like
I'm not.
Lactoid.
I am not talking about regulating.
Explain
like,
yourself, Lactoid.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not talking about like stopping adults.
Yeah, your
from-
name
from
begins with
eating,
an L.
from eating whatever they want. I'm not. I actually want to stop the government from interfering in any adult's business for whatever they put into their own bodies, if that's their concern. I don't know, like what you're talking. I mean, maybe an expansion of the FDA
banning
in terms of
high
like
fructose corn syrup would
Lactoid-
be
you're missing. No, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. I'm not talking about banning high fructose corn syrup. Wick asked a question: if we could snap our fingers and then tomorrow any substance could go away, if like it was alcohol, we would see like a dramatic reduction in problems.
Wouldn't it be
And my
much easier
point-
just to
and
ban
my
fat kids
point-
at this point?
My point was, if you snap your fingers and remove high fructose corn syrup, you're going to see like a tremendous amount of reduction of like health problems as well.
Yeah, not
Because in
the
this
same.
country, no, it's not the same. It's not the same. But arguably it's worse when you have a third of this country obese. When you have the number one killer is heart disease. All right, number one killer is not alcohol.
Yeah, we
It's
should
heart
criminalize
disease.
heart disease.
Yeah.
Number two is cancer, and that comes from obesity too. In fact, all the top 10, like not all of them, but a lot of the top 10 is related and substantially caused by obesity.
Yes, but
yeah,
we're
and if you ban,
And
if
we
you
feed
just
our
got rid of
kids
high
this.
fructose corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup,
Syrup,
companies
yeah.
would use an alternative that is probably like maybe marginally better for you, maybe marginally worse.
What if
for
we
you,
just
depending
ban-
on,
what
like,
if we
the
just-
bottom line production costs?
Bro,
You're right.
why-
And when we legalize
what's
drugs,
wrong?
people use alternatives.
Wait,
right?
wait. What's wrong with us as a society coming out and just being like, hey, we're going to ban you from harming our society. We're going to ban you from doing things that hurt our people, right? And by hurt, it's like if they're making our people unhealthy, if
Okay,
they're causing
Hitler.
detriment to our people, if they're like, if it's like this person's doing drugs and it's like
That'd be
hurting
way
their
too broad
lungs,
of
or
regulation,
this
FK.
person's
I
doing
don't know how
drugs
you would
and it's
even
hurting their like
start
mental
to
state
regulate
and it's
that.
hurting the people around them. It regulated the way we already do, where it's like, listen, at the end of the day, I feel like all Lactoid was describing is how we already punish crime. Where it's like, if we find out that you're doing stuff that's like problematic, we're gonna come in and we're gonna be like, listen, we're gonna deal with this now, right? All I'm saying is like,
that's
we
not,
just
that's not
add
always
other
true.
steps.
Right. That's not. It's often true. It's very often true that when people get busted for drugs, it's because they're stealing or it's because they're carjacking or some shit that I think should carry incredibly hefty penalties. Okay.
Yo, brain
But,
blast.
but there's a
brain
lot of
blast.
people
You know
though.
what we should
You have your
do?
brain blast in a second because there's a lot of people who non-violently do drugs and don't infringe upon people and just want to sit in their house and like they work a full-time job and they'll smoke.
Bro, what
they'll smoke
percentage
whatever
of
the fuck they
charges
smoke.
are coming from like cops busting into random people's houses for smoking weed?
Yo, that's hot.
No, so a lot of it's not like people
Bussin'.
busting into houses, but what a lot of it is like, okay, we pull you over for like some kind of minor traffic infraction and we find drugs in the car. Or we have a cop pretend to be a drug dealer.
You
and
shouldn't be
sell you
driving with drugs
drugs
in your car. What do you want?
Why
do you
not?
Want you shouldn't be driving with alcohol in your car. Do you?
Yes,
Are you
but
okay
what
with
do you
that?
mean?
An open container.
Not
Listen,
an
if you
open
want to
container.
drive,
If I keep it in my
if you want
trunk,
to
what's
drive
wrong
with
with
drugs
that?
in your car, if you want to drive with drugs in your car, be smart. Close the container, right? Make sure that the smell isn't getting out.
I watch a lot of cops, okay, and they literally will be like, "Do you have any drugs in the car?" And like they'll like,
Yeah, but they got
drivers
reasons,
are
right?
stupid.
And guess what? If they don't have a reason, if they don't have a reason, if they don't have a reason to believe drugs are in the car, then as a driver, it's your job to be like, listen, go ahead. Like I'm not consenting to
Again,
this search.
Cops
You
will
have
say,
reason to
no.
search,
Wait, one more thing.
and you move
Cops.
with it.
So I literally like asked police officers about this, and by and large, cops really personally don't really care that much about marijuana, right? But one of the police officers I asked, what do you think about legalization of marijuana? He said that he's actually against it because being able to smell marijuana gives you probable cause to search.
True. People are
Yes.
idiots.
Yes. And so the erosion of our civil liberties begins with this.
No.
I can go anywhere. I smell
Your
this
civil
on you.
liberties stop
I
and
smell
stop
this
at the
on
end
you.
of that paper. It starts and stops at the end of that paper. At the end of the day, if you're a drug user, you should be smart enough to be like, listen, if they can smell it, then I'm fucked, right? If I put it in,
They can claim they smell it.
they can claim, but if you went through all the process of putting it in containers that like block smell and you're like trying to prove that like, even if you go to court, right, and they're like, oh, this is the evidence, this is the weed right here, you could be like, listen, that weed was in a container that was specifically made so you couldn't smell out of that
Good
container.
luck. No,
you could try to
no.
argue that.
So good luck with that. Yeah.
You say good luck with that, but that's how court works. You have legal rights.
You're gonna have
I'm
shit.
Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights?
You're gonna have shit luck arguing that. First of all,
tax drugs.
drug dogs can smell through basically any shit that you got.
That's
okay?
if they call a drug
fucking-
dog. What's their reason
And
for
they
even calling
train
that
drug dogs. And they
What's that-
train
what's
drug
their reason
dogs
for even
to
calling
hit
the
on
drug dog?
cars.
What's their
They
reason for
train-
even calling
Stop.
a drug dog?
Hey. They train drug dogs to hit on cars like at certain indicators of the officer. Not necessarily the fact there's actually drugs, but like the dogs will hit if the owner does particular things, right? This is well known. So again, the drug war is particularly offensive to like our civil liberties because it's used as a pretext for the police and the government to get into our lives in a whole bunch of ways that they wouldn't be able to before. And this was
You're
the
right,
whole. It is just true, right? And so like
we should abolish police officers because some police officers are racist, right? Just like how some police officers
my
teach
God.
their drug dogs to mark cars on certain.
What I'm
on
saying
certain
is,
finger presses, right?
if drugs were legalized, the government would have a lot less of a pretext to search your car, to raid houses, to fund the fucking DEA. Which how much fucking money do we spend on that? And how much money do we spend on the drug war in Mexico?
Maybe if they have
like, either
evidence that
directly
you're
or
like
indirectly.
addicted, maybe if they have evidence that you're addicted, maybe they should raid
Okay,
your
so
house.
this
Maybe
is
they
another-
should
this
go
brings
through
up
the
another
process of putting
issue.
you in treatment.
This brings up another issue, right? For those of you who are against, or who are for, I should say, for decriminalization, right? The examples you give that are successful, such as in Portugal, are only successful as they receive funding, as they continue to receive massive amounts of government money. What happens when we decriminalize things and these programs that we have set up, the necessary rehab centers, all these health programs, they start slashing funding on these things. What happens? Because they will. They will absolutely slash the funding on all of these. Because it's happened in other countries, it will continue to happen here. Absolutely.
Well, when we slash the funding on it, which, you know, as Wick said, is probably inevitable, because everything in government, once it's proven to work, if it does work, we'll eventually see if we can save money on it. But I think it would be important for us to make sure to examine what happens, what increases, what doesn't, and see if we can target those areas specifically in our next round of funding yearly, as we do for the government.
Okay, fair enough.
That would be the most common sense scenario that I would say to figure out how we can move forward with that when we take slash the funding and make it less of what we're already going to initially put forward for it.
Certainly. I think that
that being said,
Go ahead, finish.
That being said, I do want to say I do think a substantial amount of money if we ever got federal decriminalization across the board, I do think the jail system would be able to divert a large amount of funding towards that. So I would say I think America would be able to subsidize a large enough amount of money to initially definitely kick off this program, if not sustain it for a while.
Keep in mind Portugal, just.
Can I ask Wick? I have a question for you. If let's say you had somebody who wasn't taking any drugs, but like they were just by nature were just as unproductive as a chronic drug user, were just as criminally apt.
Rehabilitate them.
We're just as et cetera, et cetera. Would you be in favor of preemptively arresting them so they don't continue to harm society?
So, under your hypothetical here, right? How do we know that they're apt towards criminality?
The hypothetical is just that based on what we know about them, based on their history, based on
they're a league streamer.
Psychological.
Yes.
So signs, etc. And let's say they don't hold employment, just like a drug user doesn't hold employment. They sit around. They're kind of a bad driver, right? They just barely pass their driving exam. They're a pretty terrible driver. They drive as badly as a good driver would drive drunk. Okay, in every single way, they're just mimic a drug user, but they just don't do drugs.
Yeah,
in order to make society better, should we preemptively arrest them before they go ahead and do some crime later on?
No, because any mechanism which we create to kind of identify these things has too many problems. Whereas any mechanism that we say to criminalize drug use is not the same. It does not have the same amount of problems.
Make a point.
Wick, we already have a mechanism for that, though. If they're driving like a drug user and they're not on drugs, they don't get a driver's license.
They'll still get a ticket.
They'll fail. They'll fail their driver's test because they're driving like they're on drugs.
Yeah, that's a really obvious sign, right? Yeah.
But
for somebody who's on drugs and stuff like that, what's a more obvious sign from that, right?
So again, we know that the issue here is that there is a substance that exists that if people take that, it makes them worse people. It makes them worse people when it comes to society. We know this. And we can attack it on that grounds. I'm not concerned as much about someone who's just an asshole and lazy, as long as they don't break the law. My concern is a substance that takes otherwise productive individuals and makes them unproductive. That is the problem.
Why does a productive person not have the right to be
productive?
As unproductive?
I mean, counterproductive is they blow, they ruin everything. I
get what you're saying, right? But what I'm asking is, hold on. Why does a productive
individual doesn't do it? Typically, a productive individual probably doesn't need drugs to cope with their life, right? Does that make sense?
Well, trust me, I'm in the legal profession. That is not true. Okay.
You always interrupt me and you don't let me talk.
I always interrupt you. Are you kidding me?
You do.
True. Lactoid. Stop it.
You fucked a coconut. Shut the fuck up. I'm in the middle of responding to Wick's point here.
Go ahead.
What do you mean? You're the one who's always wound up all the time, and I've been on your side this entire
I'm
time.
Black
the one
Hood.
that's wound up.
Lactoid,
Yeah,
lactoid,
you
lactoid.
are.
Okay,
This
all
is
right.
what drugs does to
Chill.
people,
I've been-
guys.
I've
See,
been-
fucker.
I
been
hear
making-
I'm the only one here that's sober. I'm the only one here that
Okay.
knows what it's like to
Me
live
too, me too,
without
me too, me too.
drugs.
I've been
And this is
making
what
jokes
drugs
since
is
early
doing
on.
to the people around
my,
you.
my question for you, Wick, is why does a productive person have less of a right to be unproductive if they so choose, as opposed to somebody who's just unproductive?
So the problem with drugs is it's not so much you can't choose to put other people at risk to a certain degree, right? Like there's a certain level where we say if you do this thing, it's putting people around you, not only yourself but those around you, at such undue risk that we do not allow you to do this thing. We do a nice shirt change, by the way. We do not
I
allow
love
you
you,
to
Sorry,
put
I
those-
was sweating and
It's
dying
fine.
in the heat.
we don't allow you to do this thing because not only does it put you at so much risk, it puts others around you at so much risk.
Your
That's
children.
the thing with drugs. Yeah, exactly. So if we legalized and decriminalized heroin, meth, all these other drugs, it's going to, again, remove a deterrent that, and also create a market, both remove a deterrent and create a market for these substances, which will put
Hold
other
on.
people, not only those who do them,
Hold
but
on.
those around them, at higher risk,
There's
and that's
another argument.
unacceptable to me. Does that make
There's
sense?
a better argument. There's a better argument
Please.
here.
Please.
We have infrastructures in society that can only bear a certain amount of stress. We have a limited capacity to expand them
Hold on,
rapidly
no.
and infinitely. And if you look to the city of Portland's emergency response services, you can see a good example of what happens when you decriminalize without enough safety net resources in place. I think
Yes.
yesterday there were 15 people in queue waiting for emergency response services in a maxed out ambulance service. And I think about half of them, if I read correctly, were like overdose instances, people that needed emergency response services due to overdoses. And that not only taxes all of the services for it not only creates a huge burden to respond to those, but it also puts the people who actually need emergency services through no wrongdoing or like through no fault of their own back further in line when we have maxed out services and people are struggling to
Yeah.
access them. So there's like a certain amount of stress that the system can bear. And frankly, we don't have the resources to allow for hundreds of thousands of people to fall into medical emergencies because we just decided that it was like their right, their free prerogative. So
And it's
How-
like
wait. How do we have the
Does anybody disagree with
resources?
that? Wait,
How
does
do we have
anybody
the, yes,
disagree?
I disagree with that. How do we have the resources to
Why?
pay? How do we have the resources to pay for all those prison cells, for the DEA, for drug raids, and like a fucking the military in Mexico? We can afford all of that, but we can't afford ambulances.
Wick was
No, because
Wick
it's
was
not
very
about that.
clear
It's not
earlier
about that.
he
It's
wanted to
about the
talk
ambulance.
universe we live in, not one where we deconstruct every cog in the machine.
Yeah.
And
No, we
rebuild
currently
one that
pay for
has-
this.
Because
Stop, stop,
Lactoid,
stop,
the
stop.
ambulance
Talk about
isn't
the
a
budget. Talk about
solution.
all of
That
the
I talk
ambulance-
ambulance.
very little.
Just
You
set
guys
it
won't
up.
shut the fuck up. So I'm just going to say my closing piece. Decriminalization can have some benefits, but in totality, without the proper instruments in place to catch all the people who are caught up in its wake, there can be some really disastrous human cost to it. No one here seems to have like a cogent framework that they can verbalize that they'd like to see enacted in the world. Lactoid is completely unrealistic in his libertarian view of the world as usual, and we should reject any framework that relies so heavily on everyone to fend for themselves. Thank you for your
Obliteration.
time, Wick. I
Lactoid. The issue
appreciate
is
Portland, it
Shut
was
the
really nice
fuck
talking to you.
up for 5 more seconds. Jesus Christ, forget it. You guys have a good night.
Sorry. Thank you, Portland. It was
Bye.
wonderful talking to you.
Okay.
See you
Bye, Portland.
later.
I want to respond. I want to
Lactoid.
respond.
Wait.
I was
Lactoid.
mentioned. I was mentioned
the
by
issue.
name. I want to explain. I want to
This
explain.
ties into that, and I want you to respond to both.
Okay,
basically.
fine. Go ahead.
But the issue is, you're trying to talk about like, oh, just ambulances. But like, if you don't have that other step, if all you're doing is like constantly like, oh, the police will give someone Narcan or the ambulance will give someone Narcan and then put them back out on the street, and then that person will get right back into that ambulance, and you give them Narcan again, and you put them right back on the street.
If you think
a
that's my
fucked
take,
situation.
you're a victim of the fact that I've
That's
spoken
a-
for like 4 minutes and you guys have interrupted every goddamn time. Maybe if you shut up for more than 30
Look at who's
seconds in a
interrupting
row,
now.
you would get the entire position. Yeah, I'm having my fill now that the panel's over. Learn to shut the fuck up and let somebody talk instead of just shouting dumb shit the entire time, you fucking blowhard. Jesus Christ.
You sound angry.
Because guess
Okay,
what? It's a
you're
panel.
annoying.
We all talk.
Okay,
Are you done?
It is
here,
what
I,
it is.
here, I don't think
That's just how it works.
I don't think that my prescription
We only
is
have
like a
some-
unrealistic libertarian paradise. Okay, I'm advocating for having a whole licensing scheme for not selling to children, for having like a sort of like a to be honest with you, some regulation in the sense of people should know what they're buying. Okay, whenever you go to like these drugstores, just like with alcohol, if it says 45% ethanol in it, the product that you buy should have 45% ethanol.
So you want the
and
FDA
not
mask
and
take
and, and,
that's
and
what
not
I said earlier.
and not methanol. And I'm telling you that the overall expansion that comes that you're saying, the expansion of the government that comes with this, I'm not denying that there might be some expansion of the FDA because now they're also going to regulate these kind of drugs with all the other drugs that they regulate. But the overall size of the government, when you measure the DEA, every single police department, the militarization of the police departments, how they have to respond to gangs, the drug war in Mexico, anti-immigration efforts that have involved Mexico because everybody's fleeing Mexico because of the narco state that we created, all that shit, when you look at the size of the government that comes from all that shit, is magnitudes. It's exponentially more than the few fucking dollars in
Lactoid.
comparison that we'd have to spend
Lactoid,
giving the
can you tell me how
FDA
many-
giving the FDA the resources necessary to mandate drugstores label their shit accurately and not sell to minors.
Lactoid.
When
How many
your
people are being
cartels will just
arrested right
end
now
up going
for?
out of
How many people are
business
being
times
arrested right
when you
now?
do that.
How many people are being arrested right now, Lactoid, realistically for responsibly consuming drugs? The issue is people are very much irresponsibly consuming drugs. It's fucking up our society. I'd like a world better where instead we go, hey, guess what? Like, if we catch you doing these drugs, we're not just gonna like fix you up and put you right back out there. And when we fix you up, we're gonna make sure you're not back out there doing these drugs. We're gonna put you in a system where we like get you off the streets, get you off of these drugs, fix
This
you
makes-
up,
this
and,
makes
like,
no
move
sense.
you out.
We need to.
People don't have the right culture. People don't really have the right education right now to responsibly consume drugs in the right way right now, right? Obviously, if we educate people the right way, if we teach people how to consume drugs the right way over time, like us kids, right? Or whatever like that, right? Over time, then sure, over time, maybe at some point in the future, then sure, they can consume drugs at some point in the future in the correct way, but not right now. Does that make sense?
Okay, I want to
Food
give
stamp-
space to Kycord. Go ahead, Kycord.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, in terms of education, I feel like my entire life in public education, I have heard so many assemblies on drug use. And I agree. How we educate people on drugs, especially children on drugs, is not good. We're not doing enough to hardly stand against it. But like, I remember doing DARE when I was in the 4th grade and that being stupid as fuck. And I was like,
It's
well,
not even. Wait, hold on. It's not even like standing
I want a
against
medal.
it. It's just that like even like pushing hard against it is an irresponsible way of presenting it because
exactly.
because it's if you repress it enough, then people want to do it more because they want to find out what this forbidden fruit is, right?
Wait,
then
you don't
if
believe
you-
this. You don't believe this. Do you,
No, what I'm
do you think
proposing-
that by going a hard stance against rape, that we're just creating this forbidden fruit? Like, ooh, they're saying rape is so
Yeah,
bad and
Yeah,
putting
in
prison
fact-
years.
in fact-
I
in
want
fact,
to try it.
You don't believe us either. In fact, I know you don't believe us either. Maybe you're just steel manning because the other guy is gone, okay? But I'm gonna tell you what, Wick, all right? There's plenty of instances where in the church it's like, oh, rape is bad, forcing yourself upon women's bad. But guess what? In the plenty of times in like the homes of these Catholic families and whatever, all the time marital rape happens. All the time these like raping children happens. This happens.
But
literally
what
all
you're
the time.
arguing for is,
This happens
hey,
all the time.
this happens all the time, so we should just make it. We should make it decriminalized so that that'll fix the problem.
What
I
the
just wanna
fuck?
point out the
No,
weaklings
I'm not
who couldn't
arguing
stand
that.
on
I'm
the
just
alcohol
arguing the
stand.
way we handle these matters and the way we teach these in schools is not good. That's the point that I'm trying to make, right? We're just saying that, okay, if we're gonna like actually like teach a generation to consume substances responsibly, then we shouldn't say, oh, we should consume a lot irresponsibly to the point where we get super addicted and ruin the lives of people around us. But we shouldn't also say, oh my god, we should be super abstinent from
How
it.
much
to the
much
point-
rape
to
would
the
you
point
advocate
where-
for?
to the point where we should shoot everybody who does marijuana.
Sure. Well,
Does
how
that make
much
sense?
rape would you say would be acceptable that we should
Yeah,
advocate and
except doing
educate
drugs
for?
is not comparable to rape. Would you say doing like cocaine is equal to rape? To forcing somebody up a fucking coconut tree and start butt fucking them? Is that
But
equal
again-
to doing cocaine?
Why would education on one thing be deleterious if we take a hard stance against it? It's creating this forbidden fruit that people want to try to do. However, in this other situation, you say by taking a hard stance against this, we should take less of a hard stance against this so we don't create those such situations. Why are these congruent?
If I can.
Rather, I think it's good to educate people and say, hey, this is all the information that we have before you, right? The obvious thing is that when we teach people and kids about sexual education, that is also the information that tells them, hey, this is why probably forcing yourself onto somebody sexually is probably something that's bad. You know what I mean?
It
Yeah,
shouldn't
so
be
as
just
a-
probably, but go ahead, Quackord.
Yeah, no,
And then we'll do
Wiki
outros
TV.
because we
Ooh,
are
I come
running
in
out.
with
Food Chops,
every day.
Food Chops, I agree with a lot of the things that you said because in terms of how I feel like we should go about educating when we go
You
forward.
glazing me, bro. Disagree with me. I'm kidding. Just kidding.
Okay, no, I disagree with some of what you said, but I agree with more.
Nah,
than
that
what
was an
you're
extra
not.
glaze right there. That disagree when she has to disagree. That's over.
no, but genuinely, I want to say that we should just educate children on what the effects of drugs are, what it can be, how it's used. Taking a hard stance on them, I do think, I'm gonna be honest, when I was in DARE, I remember when that happened and a lot of kids wanted to do drugs afterwards. I think taking a very hard, cold stance that all drugs are bad, don't do it, you're gonna get arrested, yada yada yada, can make kids more tempted and more. It can pique their curiosity. I don't think rape is comparable. Like I'm gonna be very dead honest with you. Rape is not comparable because I think kids understand.
Another reason why rape is not comparable is because rape is one of these things where it's an infraction upon another human being as well, right? Does that make sense? It's because when you're doing drugs, right? When you're doing drugs, you are ingesting a chemical upon yourself, right? You're injecting or ingesting a chemical upon yourself. Sure, you can.
We
you
gotta
can
get
be
to closing
harming.
statements.
You can stop. You can harm another person. You can harm another person indirectly by consuming their finances for drugs, right? You can do that, but when it comes to something like rape, you're forcing yourself directly. That takes a degree of sociopathy to do, but then it doesn't take a degree of sociopathy
Okay.
for you to like consume drugs. I don't
Food
know.
stamps?
I don't know if you're stupid
Food stamps.
or you can't comprehend that. Anyways, go ahead.
Food
Yeah.
stamps. We gotta get to closing statements because people have places to be. I'll
Okay.
just say that
Alright.
you are wrong and obviously high,
No.
and you have been today.
I can't be able to defend
You have
Lactoid
been-
on this, and he's
You have
stupid
been the
as fuck. Yeah, go
strongest
ahead.
argument for anti-decriminalization than any argument I could have made today. So thank you
I'm not
for
on
being
any
here.
drugs.
Go ahead,
Why
Lactoid.
everyone keeps thinking I'm
Give
on
us some
drugs?
closing.
Okay.
Thank you. I was making my closings. Really appreciate everybody here today who spoke with me, even the people that had to drop out. If you like what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter/X, or YouTube. I'm right, as always. Legalize all drugs. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you coming through. Food stamps. Give us your closing.
Kick.com/food-chops. Check out my Discord server, also there. And listen, right? YouTube at A Food Chops, so A and then Food Chops. And if you want to come debate me there, you're always welcome to do so. I welcome anybody to come debate me. Okay, all right. So yeah, that's about it. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you for
I'm
being
not
here.
on drugs. Okay, all right. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. FK, go ahead.
Hello. I'm just average FK. The world is very complicated, and I am very cross right now. Thank you very much for joining this conversation.
Been a wild one. I appreciate you coming in last minute to replace someone. We had a lot of dropouts on this one. I don't understand why, but it is what it is. Finally, Quackord.
Thank you, Wick, so much for having me on for my first panel. It's been wonderful.
Has it?
I thought we got a chance to interact with a lot of interesting people with different perspectives. Lactoid, I really enjoyed a lot of your point of views. I'm definitely going to follow you and check you out in the future. Average FK, I'm going to go to your Twitch channel because you had a lot of base takes. Not everything I agreed with, but I think we'd get along, and I would love to talk with you a lot in the future. And Food Stamps, I'm going to follow you on Kick for sure, or YouTube. I think I've already watched one of your videos, so thank you so much for having me on. And Wick, thank you so much for allowing me to use this point and for taking this point up. And I really appreciate you having me on. You can find me at twitch.tv/KaiCord. I'm a variety streamer. I stream mainly politics, but a little bit of everything if you're interested.
Okay, gang, check them all out. They're great. What do we got coming up? Hopefully better stuff than this. Today was rough, gang, but we got through it. We got through it, and thank you for being here. Gang, if you're liking this content for whatever reason, hit that like button, hit that subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching this on Twitch or Kick, hit that follow button, throw me some subs, throw me some bits, really helps the channel. We got some banger content coming up tomorrow. We got Wick and Omar. We're going to be having a guest on and talking to them. I don't know who the guest is yet. It's been one of those weeks. Wednesday is the big one. Wednesday's a big show, gang. Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Prime Kai. We're going to have Majin. We're going to have Adarius. We're going to have Rico. We're going to have Izzy. We're going to have one person I forgot. Someone else there. And we're going to be talking about racial awareness versus colorblindness. What is the best path forward for racial issues in America? How do we resolve these racial issues in America? Do we take a colorblind approach or do we take a racially aware approach? I have gathered an all-black everything to discuss. So, tune in. Wednesday, 6 p.m. And, yeah, then Friday, we're going to have a slurs debate between Rose Malay, Void Zonia, and Doobie, and one other anti-slur person yet to be determined. I'll see you guys later. Bye!